Chapter 745. The sun had just risen, and the cool morning breeze was cool. The ripples on the moon lake were clear and moving, and the water plants by the lake swayed beautifully. Surrounded by hundreds of cannibals, Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile walked out of the tent. The two of them were almost half naked, facing everyone's gaze without fear. Anyway, everyone was like this. Birds of a feather flocked together. There was nothing strange about it. However, the two of them stood in stark contrast. Compared to Immortal Crocodile, who was almost 2 meters tall, Yu Qianqiu looked a little weak. Fortunately, he had been practicing the animal show for a long time, so his tight muscles did not make him look weak. Yu Qianqiu, who was wearing beast skin boots and a leather skirt, walked in front of the majestic horse with large strides. He flipped his braids in an incomparably coquettish manner and directly jumped on the horse. Garland, who was leading the horse for him, looked resentful and reluctantly handed the reins to him. Yu Qianqiu quickly pretended not to see it and turned his head. The 6 of them all got on the horse. The 3 warriors were Yu Qianqiu, Immortal Crocodile and Boli. The other 3 were to help them. The moment the 6 of them got on their horses, the crowd of clansmen parted to make a path for them. They danced wildly on both sides. More than 20 animal skin drums were arranged in 2 rows. Intense pung-pung sounds rang out as they sent the warriors off. Boli led the way, pulling the reins and galloping away. Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind, followed by Immortal Crocodile and the remaining 3 tribesmen. The 6 of them rushed into the winding path in the distant forest, disappearing from the anticipating eyes of the tribesmen. The winding path in the dense forest was winding, and if one's horsemanship was not good, it was easy to crash into trees or run into bushes. Fortunately, the 6 of them were good horsemanship, and the branches and leaves on both sides quickly flashed past their ears. Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind Boli, suddenly heard Immortal Crocodile's voice behind him. That woman's eyes were very clingy. She took off all her clothes and touched you a few times at night. I can't believe you could resist it. He was naturally referring to Garland. Old monster, you actually peeped on me while I was sleeping? Yu Qianqiu replied angrily. What are you shouting for? Do you think I don't know that you're spying on me? Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. It wasn't that he was a peeping Tom, but Immortal Lord Crocodile's actions shocked him. She had thought that he would be reserved, but who would have thought that this old monster would actually have a taste of meat in the cannibal tribe? He seemed to not reject anyone, and every night, he would have sex with several women. How heroic! Yu Qianqiu was curious, and could not help but use his spiritual sense to check every night. But then again, with the other party's cultivation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to discover that he was peeping. It was just that he didn't expect the old monster to be so vigilant even when doing things. It was really surprising. The horses galloped through the forest, and the sound of hooves rang out incessantly. However, the 2 of them were silent. Let's not talk about each other. Neither of us was a good person. But after a while, Immortal Lord Crocodile transmitted his voice again. Yu Qianqiu, if you can't help me recover my cultivation in 500 years, don't blame me for being impolite. Hey, you've said it 100 times. Do I look like a liar to you? Don't mention it in the future. I'm sick of hearing it even if you don't say it. Yu Qianqiu gave a perfunctory reply. In order to get Immortal Lord Crocodile to be his bodyguard, he had spent a lot of effort. In the end, he made up a white lie that he could help him recover his cultivation in 500 years. Only then did he manage to tame Immortal Lord Crocodile. Otherwise, why would Immortal Lord Crocodile accompany him everywhere? He had already calculated that if the 2 of them were really together for 500 years, even a rock would feel warm. He didn't believe that the old monster would really do anything to him. If Immortal Lord Crocodile was really that heartless, then he had nothing to say. He would leave, and Immortal Lord Crocodile would continue to stay in the Eastern Holy Land. They would pretend that they had never met. If his cultivation was higher than Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years, of course, Yu Qianqiu was just imagining it. He didn't think that his cultivation would surpass Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years. In fact, Immortal Lord Crocodile wasn't that gullible. However, The master-disciple pair's methods were really unimaginable and too magical. Although he didn't believe that he could recover his cultivation in 500 years, he still had some hope in his heart. What if he really succeeded? It was better than spending tens of thousands of years to cultivate again, right? Moreover, 500 years was really nothing compared to his long lifespan. It was worth a try. In the end, he more or less felt an indescribable charisma from Yu Qianqiu. He realized that it was quite interesting to be with this guy. Although this guy wasn't a good person, ever since he got to know him, he suddenly realized that having a long life wasn't lonely at all. Occasionally, he had a glimmer of enlightenment. He asked himself, what is the true meaning of cultivation? After spending half a day, the group of 6 finally ran out of the forest. They could see a road in the wilderness in front of them, stretching into the distance like a yellow ribbon. In the distance, there were many houses clustered together, and it seemed to be a small town. Bolli pulled the reins and rode on the hillside. The 5 people behind him lined up and looked into the distance. In just a short while, several groups of people had run on the road. They were dressed like their own people. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know which tribe they were from, he guessed that their purpose was similar to that of the cannibals. They were all going to participate in the fence meeting. Judging from the number of people passing by, it seemed that the cannibals were really a small tribe. At least every group that passed by had at least a dozen riders, but they only had 6 people. The sun was high in the sky. Looking at the panting horses, Bolli waved his hand and pointed to the small town in the distance. The small town in front is the midpoint to Lus City. When we get there, let the horses recover their strength and continue on their way. That way, we can reach Lus City before dark when the horses are exhausted. What do you think? Facing Bolli's questioning gaze, Yu Qianqiu scratched his braids and smiled. We don't know each other well, so we'll listen to you. Originally, with his and Immortal Crocodile's abilities, there was no need to run slowly to Lus City. They could just fly there. But in order to not expose their cultivation, they had to do this. Bolli smiled heartily and nodded. He took the lead and rushed down the hillside. The 6 riders ran on the yellow road towards the small town in the distance. Running on the straight road was obviously much more comfortable than running on the winding path in the forest. Yu Qianqiu swung his braids in the wind. The feeling of the wind blowing through his hair was nice and cool. Seeing that they were outside the town, Yu Qianqiu was about to rush into the town, but he saw Bolli slow down and pull the reins to a stop. The others also stopped. Only Yu Qianqiu did not notice that he had run too far, and only stopped in front of the town's gate. The gate made of wood and stone had a bit of an ancient charm, but the workmanship was very rough. There were many people on the streets inside. Looking at their clothes, it was obvious that most of them were people of various tribes, but some were wearing more formal long robes. Yu Qianqiu took a few glances at the streets inside, and found that there were not many decent houses. He turned his horse around, and saw that Bolli and the others had already dismounted, and led the horses to a few shady trees by the roadside. They had the intention of sitting on the ground, and only Immortal Crocodile was looking at him with a faint smile. Yu Qianqiu immediately ran over, jumped off the horse, and asked Bolli curiously, "The town is in front. Aren't you going in to rest? What are you doing here?" Bolli looked at the other 3 tribesmen awkwardly. Yu Qianqiu immediately became suspicious, and under his repeated questioning, Bolli finally told him the truth. In fact, the customs of each tribe were quite fierce, and fights were common. It was difficult to get along well with the other tribes. The cannibals were the smallest tribe in this area, and it was inevitable for them to suffer some losses. To put it bluntly, they were often bullied. This town was called Shizi Town, which meant the westernmost town on the mainland. Originally, there was no town here. This town was built by some of the larger tribes because the nearby tribes envied the life of the people in the city. They began to learn from the people in the city to do business. The mayor was the chief of the largest tribe in the area, the Shizi tribe. Although the cannibals were small, they were a place where warriors came from. Often, there would be people who could participate in the fence contest and win generous rewards. This made the nearby tribes jealous and hateful, because there were many tribes participating in the fence contest, but there were only 100 winners. Therefore, Every time the cannibals settled in the town to rest, there would always be people from other tribes who would come to provoke them, taking the opportunity to injure or disable the cannibal warriors, so that they could not participate in the contest. This method seemed very reckless, but it was an effective way to reduce the number of strong competitors. And no matter how brave the cannibal warriors were, they could not resist the large number of people. In the end, they could only compromise and rest here, not daring to enter the town. In fact, although this kind of thing sounded annoying, it was not a big deal between the tribes. Bullying the weak was completely the nature of these almost primitive tribes. But after hearing this, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and despised bully infinitely. No wonder your woman was so anxious to sleep with me. After thinking about it, Yu Qianqiu also felt that he should not cause trouble here. It was not that he was afraid of the nearby tribes, but he was worried that it would attract the attention of the immortals. So he led the horse, and was about to tie it up. Unexpectedly, a gust of wind blew, and a lot of things fell from the swaying branches. Yu Qianqiu felt something crawling on his head. He grabbed it, and a big green furry worm wriggled in his hand. Yu Qianqiu was originally prepared to just bear with it, and let it go. He didn't want to cause any trouble, but in the end, this disgusting caterpillar caused his stomach to be filled with rage. Squeak. The caterpillar was pinched so hard that green juice shot out, and it lost its life on the spot. He threw it away and jumped directly on the horse's back. He said to Bully in a deep voice, "Damn it! Kind people get bullied, and hiding under a tree still gets bullied by caterpillars. There is no way to live like this. All of you, get on the horse and go to the town to rest." Regardless of the consequences, he rode all the way to West Town. Bully and the others looked at each other. Immortal Crocodile had already gotten on the horse with a smile, and they had no choice but to follow. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu directly charged into the town on his horse. He madly rushed from the west to the east of the town, completely ignoring the pedestrians on the road. He used his horse's hooves to clear a path, startling the people on the road into cursing. Before the curses had died down, he ran back from the east. Immediately in the middle of the street, he looked at a 2-story wooden building and muttered, "This is the most luxurious one." Chapter 746. The so-called most luxurious was only because it was much bigger than the other houses. Yu Qianqiu had just jumped off his horse when Bodo and the others arrived. Yu Qianqiu pointed inside and said, "We'll rest here." With Immortal Crocodile leading the way, the others also dismounted. Under the gazes of the people on the street, Bodo and the other 3 vigilantly gripped the knives on their waists. Yu Qianqiu looked at the knives on his waist and said disapprovingly, "What's wrong? Are you afraid that there'll be danger if you rest here?" Bodo lowered his head slightly and said in a low voice, "This shop is owned by the Shizi. We cannibals can't afford to rest here." What he meant was that the Shizi would rip them off in terms of price. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and stretched out his hand. "Didn't you bring money? Give me the money pouch." Bodo was startled, but out of respect for this brave warrior, who could kill the lake monster, he untied a small cloth pouch from his waist and handed it to him. Yu Qianqiu was about to take it when he heard someone yell, "How dare you scare my people by horse racing in town?" 7 or 8 people quickly rushed over. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to ask what they were up to, the leader of the group suddenly snatched the money pouch from Bodo's hand. Weighing the pouch in his hand, he looked at Yu Qianqiu in disdain. "This pouch of money belongs to us. We'll take it as you scaring our people." Before he could finish, there was a flash of cold light, followed by a streak of blood. Before anyone could see what was going on, they found that the person's hand that was holding the money pouch was gone, leaving only a bare arm. Blood suddenly spurted out from the dark red stump. The knife on Yu Qianqiu's waist had moved to his right hand at some point, and his left hand was holding Bodo's money pouch with a severed hand. His movements were so fast that the person only realized that his hand had been cut off when blood spurted out of his hand. Ah! Before he could finish screaming, he saw a cold light flash by, and a large head flew into the air. Yu Qianqiu raised his leg and kicked the man's chest, sending him flying a few meters away. Blood spurted out from the wound on his neck. Yu Qianqiu didn't even bother to look at it. He pulled off the broken hand that was holding onto the money pouch and muttered, "What AF asterisk king problem? Asking for a beating." In just a few moments, the people on the street who were prepared to watch the show were all stunned. Bully and the other three were already dumbfounded. The street instantly became very quiet. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face also twitched slightly. He thought to himself, how ruthless. The other 7 people who had come with the dead person only now realized that their clansmen had been killed. Their eyes turned red, and without any warning, they all pulled out their knives and charged at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu raised his head slightly and charged into the crowd with quick steps. A series of punches, kicks, and saber lights danced in the air. 7 heads flew up and 7 corpses fell to the street with blood spurting out from their mouths. Their bodies were still twitching, and only after a long while did they stop moving. Yu Qianqiu shook off the blood on his knife and put it away without a change in expression, as if nothing had happened. To him, killing a few mortals was not something to be happy about. The quiet street suddenly burst into an uproar, and everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with reverence. Bully and the other 3 looked at Yu Qianqiu with admiration. He was indeed the warrior who killed the lake monster. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. He couldn't help but want to ask this kid what he had been doing before he started cultivating. The clean and sharp close-range combat just now was very familiar and had nothing to do with the level of his cultivation. It was normal for people to die in battles between tribes. In addition, there were no legal restrictions, so it was completely up to the winner to decide. The loser could just blame it on his bad luck and take revenge if he had the ability. Under everyone's gaze, Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly carried the money bag and entered the shop. The people who were standing at the entrance to watch the show quickly retreated. Bully and the other 3 led the horses into the small alley next to the shop. They found the stable and placed the fodder for the horses before returning. When they entered the shop, they saw that Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile had already taken a seat. The table was filled with sumptuous meat dishes. Yu Qianqiu waved them over and let them eat to their heart's content. Bully and the other 3 were still a little worried. After all, things wouldn't be so peaceful outside. After all, Yu Qianqiu had killed the people of the second largest tribe in the area, the Wasi tribe. Yu Qianqiu tasted everything and found that it didn't taste very good. He immediately lost his appetite. Immortal Lord Crocodile obviously didn't like these things either. He casually took a bite and threw it aside. He turned to stare at Yu Qianqiu and transmitted his voice. "Kid, you killed to your heart's content. Have you ever thought about the entire cannibal tribe? Why? Are you worried about those old lovers who accompany you every night?" Yu Qianqiu said nonchalantly. "Don't worry. I have my own plans." While transmitting his voice, he poured all the money in the bag onto the table. There were 2 gold coins and hundreds of silver coins. Neither of them had ever seen the currency used in this continent before. They each picked up a piece and examined it. The printing was quite exquisite. There were portraits on both sides of the coin. One side was a man with a cold face, and the other side was a beautiful woman. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the portraits on both sides of the coin and could not help but snort. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After looking at the coin again, he transmitted his voice. Could it be Yi Xiao and Ji Wu? Who else could it be other than them? Tisk tsk. So Ji Wu is a beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. He looked back at Bully and asked, "How long will this money last us?" Bully put down the deer steak in his hand and said embarrassedly, "1 gold coin can be exchanged for 100 silver coins. There are about 300 silver coins here. If we use them sparingly, we should be able to use them until the end of the preliminary round. This is all the money left in the clan." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. It seemed that the cannibals were not very well off. But it did not matter, he had money. With that thought in mind, he reached out and lifted the fur skirt around his waist. Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's suspicious gaze, he grabbed a handful of things and placed them on the table. A pile of shiny golden objects appeared on the table. Everyone at the table was dumbfounded. It turned out that what Yu Qianqiu had taken out were shiny gold coins. They seemed to be newly minted coins. Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu took out another 5 or 6 handfuls of coins and put them on the table. Immortal Lord Crocodile reached out and grabbed a few pieces to verify their authenticity. They were all genuine. The engraved heads were exactly the same as the ones he had seen before. They did not look like replicas. Where did you get so many gold coins? Immortal Lord Crocodile asked in surprise. My master gave them to me, Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not doubt this answer. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu had casually made these coins using the gold seal. And the purity of these gold coins was quite high. Yu Qianqiu put all the coins on the table, and in Immortal Lord Crocodile's hands into a money bag. He threw it to the dumbfounded bully and smiled. Now you don't have to worry about money. Whatever he wanted to eat, he just let it go. I'm going to find a place to pee. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Immortal Lord Crocodile. I'm going to send the old and young of the cannibals away. I'll be back soon. With that he left. About 2 hours later, they saw him walk in. Bully and the others looked at each other. They did not know where he had gone to pee for such a long time. They were already full. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked via voice transmission. You sent them all out of the Holy East lands? Seeing Yu Qianqiu nod slightly, he did not say anything else. In fact, Yu Qianqiu had sent all the cannibals to Utopia. It was just that it was not convenient for him to say it. After eating, the bill went smoothly. There was no haggling. He only spent 1 silver coin after ordering so much meat. Even Bully and the others felt it was strange. It seemed a little too cheap. Yu Qianqiu did not think much of it. He guessed that the shopkeeper was frightened by his killing move. Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed coldly, as if he knew something. Just as they reached the door of the store, Bully suddenly stopped and said, We don't need to participate in this fence meeting anymore. They all turned around and looked at him, not knowing why he said that. Bully raised the bulging money bag in his hand and said, This much gold is enough for our people to live for many years. More importantly, we just offended the Wasi tribe. They will definitely take revenge on us. We need to go back and protect our people. The other 3 clansmen looked at each other and nodded their heads solemnly. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a mocking expression, as if saying, Who asked you to kill so many people? Who asked you to give them so many gold coins? Who asked you to send the cannibals away? Now you're getting your retribution, aren't you? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not expect himself to make a fool of himself. His face darkened as he said, No, we have to participate in the fence meeting. Chapter 747. There were many reasons why Yu Qianqiu had to go to the fence meeting. The mortals here definitely could not see the purple fire, so he had to contact the immortals here to find out. If ordinary immortals did not know, then he had to find a way to find high-level immortals in the immortal cities. If even the high-level immortals in the immortal cities did not know, then the purple fire was very likely hidden underground. It was much more troublesome to find things underground than above ground. You would probably have to find the meditation cultivators, who lived here for a long time. And to meditate here, he still had to find the immortals in the immortal world, to find out where the entrance to the underground was. In short, to find the purple fire, he could not avoid interacting with the immortals here. The fence meeting was a good place to start. There was another thing that he was thinking about. What would happen if Bai Changchun went to challenge the immortal lords and the netherworld generals? Although he did not seem to care, he was actually very conflicted and anxious to find out more information. However, with his and Immortal Lord Crocodile's current cultivation, the Eastern Holy Land was not a place for them to act presumptuously. They could only advance step by step and find out more information. Thus, he had to go to the fence meeting. Seeing that he was unhappy, Bully asked in surprise, Why must we go to the fence meeting? He could not understand. Participating in the fence meeting was a very dangerous thing. Unless they had no other choice, which tribe would be willing to take such a risk? Now that they had the conditions to not participate, wasn't that a good thing? You idiot! Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, but his face showed a pained expression. He pointed at Bully and the others and lectured, No wonder the cannibals have never been strong. It's because our tribesmen flatter men like you who do not know how to be prepared for danger in times of peace. Just because of a bag of gold, you lost your fighting spirit, and did not think about improving. Isn't it better to earn more gold for your tribesmen? If you have the ability to earn more gold than your tribesmen can spend in a few lifetimes, then the future generations of cannibal warriors can protect their tribesmen and reproduce without having to bleed and die for the fence meeting. Many generations of warriors. How many tribesmen can you produce? A bunch of cowards, you disappoint me. What bullsh*t reason? Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression twitched as he turned his head to the side, not wanting to listen anymore. However, Bully and the others thought the same. They were reprimanded until their faces turned red, and they lowered their heads in shame. After a while, Bully raised his head and asked, "What if the Wasi retaliate against our people?" "Don't worry about it." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest confidently and said, "I just went to pee and bumped into a tile. The Wasi said that because they are true warriors, they will defeat us fair and square at the fence, and then they will take revenge on your people. If they lose, they will accept their defeat wholeheartedly, and will not pursue this matter any further. They will treat it as if it never happened." Bully and the other three looked at each other. Suddenly, one of them asked in a weak voice, "What if we don't get to fight against the Swaxi? Why are there so many ifs?" Yu Qianqiu roared angrily. He pointed at them and said, "A bunch of cowards. I'm ashamed to be associated with you. And you call yourselves warriors of the cannibal tribe. If you want it back, go back and return the gold coins to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed and shook his head. He had seen shameless people, but never so shameless. Just now he said he was giving them gold coins. And now he wanted them back? Bully clutched the money pouch tightly. Gold coins were the lifeline of the tribesmen. They could be used to buy salt for the entire tribe. It had nothing to do with personal honor or disgrace. How could they just give it back? The four's faces turned a little green, angered by the words cowards. The four looked at each other and nodded heavily. Bully said firmly, "Let's go to the fence." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. These people really changed their minds quickly. He retracted his hand, and the gloominess on his face dissipated. He coughed and said, "All right, it's good that you know your mistake. Let's not waste any more time and hurry on." Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's infinite disdain, Yu Qianqiu took the lead and walked out. The corpses on the street had been taken away by someone, leaving only a few pools of blood. Many people stared at them. Bully and the other three entered the alley and went to the stable at the back to get the horses. After a while, Yu Qianqiu felt something was wrong. He walked to the alley and looked around muttering, "Why are they taking so long to get the horses?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "The horses have long been taken away by someone else. Where can they get their own horses?" "What do you mean?" Yu Qianqiu turned back and asked. Then he reacted and quickly walked into the alley. There were more than a dozen horses in the spacious stable, but the 6 they rode were not there. Bully and the other 3 were anxiously looking around the stable. Yu Qianqiu squinted at the entrance of the stable. He slowly tilted his head and asked Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was slowly approaching, "You knew that our horses were taken away. Why didn't you stop them?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "Who do you think I am? A groom? Do I have the obligation to look after your horses? Besides, you didn't tell me in advance." Yu Qianqiu was about to say something, but he swallowed it. There was no need to get into a fight over such a small matter. Otherwise, he would be the one at a disadvantage. As soon as he turned around, he saw Bully running over and saying anxiously, "Our horses are gone." "They were taken away, of course they are gone," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. He sneered in his heart. Lust City's expenses were not low, and many tribes would rush to register on the last day to reduce unnecessary expenses. If they missed the registration time, the other tribes would not open the back door again. The person who stole the horses had obviously seen this, and wanted to break the cannibals' leg strength, so that they would miss the opportunity to compete. Perhaps the other party saw that they were skilled, so they did not do it openly, but secretly. No wonder they paid the bill so cheaply. If this was not trying to hide something, what was it? "Ah!" the 4 screamed. They could roughly guess what was going on. Bully said anxiously, "Then what should we do? Without the horses, we definitely can't get to Lust City in time to register." "Are you stupid? Why do you have to ask me such a simple thing?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and pointed to the horses in the stable. Others can take away your horses, but can't you take away other people's horses? Can't you use your brain? This is not good. Bolly looked around the stable and said nervously, "We didn't see who took our horses. What if it wasn't the owner of these horses?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him, as if he was looking at an idiot, and sneered. "You're crazy, that's nonsense. If we saw who it was, would the horses still be taken away? Stop talking nonsense. Who cares who it is? One horse each, let's hurry." After that, he went straight into the stable, untied the ropes and pulled out 2 horses. He gave one to Immortal Crocodile, and jumped on the horse's back. Bolly and the other 3 were not as mentally strong as him. He could even be a thief and act like it was a matter of course. They pulled out 1 horse each, and ran towards the street. Before leaving, Immortal Crocodile saw Yu Qianqiu bend his finger, and flicked a red light into the stable. It quickly disappeared into the mountain of fodder, and he did not know what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. Rushing onto the street, Yu Qianqiu swung his pigtails, and opened a path in front of the horse, scaring the pedestrians on the street, and causing them to dodge in panic. Just as the sound of horse hooves sounded, several people ran out of the shop and chased after them. "Horse thieves, stop right there." Bolly and the other 3 followed behind Yu Qianqiu with a guilty conscience, and quickly rushed out of the town. Not long after they rushed out of the town, they suddenly felt the sky change color. It was a little red, and the town behind them screamed, "Fire! Put out the fire! Quick, put out the fire!" Bolly and the other 3 looked back, and were instantly shocked. What a huge fire! It soared into the sky, and the ferocious fire quickly spread from the center of the town to the whole town. Inside the town, screams and screams could be heard incessantly. A large group of people rushed out of the town like a colony of ants, rolling and crawling as they escaped from the town. It was unknown how many people could not escape and would die in the sea of fire. Bolly and the other 3 felt a lingering fear when they saw this scene. If they had come out a little later, they might not have been able to come out again. Immortal Crocodile retracted his gaze from the raging fire in the small town, and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was galloping forward on his horse. Among the 6 of them, he was the only one who didn't turn back to look at the commotion behind him. Immortal Crocodile immediately transmitted his voice. "Although they are unruly people, your punishment is a little too much. After all, they are just ignorant mortals. Why implicate so many innocent people? Oh, it seems that you are quite sympathetic. I was afraid that there were too few people who died to move your apathetic heart." Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned back, his eyes cold, and transmitted his voice coldly. "This fire is for you to see. I just want to tell you that we are mutually beneficial and equal. No one owes anyone anything. Everyone should help each other. What happened before really hurt me. You could have stopped others from taking our horses away, but you turned a blind eye to it, as if it had nothing to do with you. Can I understand that you are hindering me? Or are you trying to make fun of me? I don't think something like this should happen between us. You should understand now that those people who did not escape the sea of fire were actually killed by you. If you could have stopped our horses from being stolen, then these people would have lived a good life. I hope that these people's deaths can be a small reminder to you that there should not be any unpleasant things between us. We still have a long way to go. You and I need to take this as a warning." Immortal Crocodile's eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. This kind of reminder would be unforgettable even if he was cold-hearted. However, he snorted coldly. "You were the one who killed them, but you want to implicate me. What nonsense." No matter what he said, Yu Qianqiu did not say anything else. He turned back and urged the horse forward. Immortal Crocodile also kept quiet. The 6 of them galloped quickly, and the burning town gradually disappeared behind them. Dirong Kingdom's great snow mountain. Under the bright sun, the snow-capped peaks were white, and the magnificent ice palace reflected a psychedelic color. Yan Juexing, dressed in a black robe, slowly walked out of the ice palace's gate. He walked expressionlessly to the ice cliff and stopped. If he took another step forward, it would be a bottomless abyss. There was mist rising from the ice cliff, gently lingering around his body. The ice and jade sculptures on the cliff were crystal clear. The steep ice layer at the bottom of the cliff, which looked like it was chiseled by knives and axes, showed a magnificent light blue color. Coupled with the mist, it was like a paradise on earth. Although it was under the bright sun, Yan Zhuixing, who stood in the mist on the ice cliff, gave people a gloomy and terrifying feeling. His cold eyes stared into the distance without moving. Bing Qingzi was in the middle of the gate of the ice palace, with Yan Bugui, Manhu and Third Excian on both sides. They were all staring at the motionless black figure in front of the ice cliff. "What's wrong with Xing?" Yan Bugui asked Bing Qingzi uneasily. He should have been happy to see Yan Zhuixing come out with all four limbs intact. Who knew that Yan Zhuixing, who came out of the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain, would turn a blind eye to his father? He brushed past him stiffly, forcing the joy on his face to be replaced by uneasiness. Suddenly Yan Zhuixing, who was in front of the ice cliff, opened his arms. The mist around his body was quickly shaken off. "Ah!" He looked up to the sky and roared crazily. His voice was hoarse and deep. It didn't sound like a human's voice at all. It was like the voice of an ancient fierce beast. The tone of the voice changed from the bottom of the abyss, as if a magical beast that had been sleeping for countless years was about to wake up. The roar became more and more brutal and louder. It scared the surrounding snow-capped peaks to the point that avalanches occurred one after another. The rumbling sound reverberated everywhere. Everyone inside the gate of the ice palace felt that the sound could penetrate their bodies and pull their hearts and lungs. Their faces changed dramatically, except for Bing Qingzi, who could still stand still. The others were all shaky and had a splitting headache. They covered their ears with their hands and tried their best to resist, but they couldn't stop the sound wave from invading. In the end, even Bing Qingzi's face began to turn pale. He suddenly raised his head and found that cracks also appeared in the ice palace. He immediately yelled, "Yan Zhuixing, control yourself!" More than half of the ice cliff, which already had a large area of cracks, collapsed. Yan Zhuixing, who was standing in front of the cliff, fell into the abyss. The roar continued to come from below, and suddenly stopped. The people inside the gate finally heaved a sigh of relief. That sound was too uncomfortable. Not to mention their splitting headache. Their internal organs were all messed up, giving them a feeling that death was better than living. Before they could react, Bing Qingzi had already teleported to the sky above the abyss and stared down. Suddenly, Bing Qingzi's pupils shrank, and he yelled angrily, "Yan Zhuixing!" Before he could finish his words, a shadow shot out from the bottom of the cliff and collided with Bing Qingzi with a majestic and unparalleled aura. With a loud bang, Bing Qingzi, who quickly pushed out his palms to block the attack, let out a muffled groan and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying dozens of meters away. The shadow appeared. Yan Zhuixing, who was wearing a black robe, had disheveled hair, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He was floating above the abyss in a horse stance. His movements were like a bow shooting a huge eagle. His whole body was surrounded by black murderous aura. One of his raised fists was shrouded in black light. Under his disheveled hair, a deep voice came out slowly, "Devil Fist." Chapter 748. It was quiet inside and outside the ice palace. Everyone in the ice palace who had yet to recover from the heart-wrenching roar were all dumbfounded. They couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Yan Zhuixing actually attacked his master, Bing Qingzi. The scariest thing was that he actually injured Bing Qingzi with just one punch. Everyone clearly saw the scene of Bing Qingzi vomiting blood. Bing Qingzi had the cultivation of late divine transformation realm. How many people in the world could injure him? Manhu and his brothers quickly flew to the sky and anxiously checked on their master's injury. Yan Bugui and Third Excian quickly flew to the side of Yan Zhuixing, whose hair was disheveled. Yan Bugui looked at Bing Qingzi, who was squinting his eyes, and anxiously scolded Yan Zhuixing. "Xing, are you crazy? How dare you attack your master?" The black light circulating on Yan Zhuixing's fist disappeared, and the black aura surrounding his body also retracted back into his body. He put down his fist that was raised to the sky and slowly raised his head. His long black hair flowed like silk and gently rested on his shoulders. The hairband that bound his hair was no longer there. Half of his face was covered by his long hair, while the other half of his face was staring at Yan Bugui emotionlessly with his cold eyes. Yan Bugui was startled by his son's stare. His heart trembled, and he was instantly speechless. "Master, are you okay?" Man Hu and his brothers asked anxiously. Bing Qingzi raised his hand and wiped the corner of his mouth. A smear of bright red was smeared on his palm. He looked down with a complicated expression and slowly shook his head. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Yan Juexing's sudden attack didn't really injure him, but the power of that punch really shocked him. Logically speaking, he should have been able to block Yan Juexing's punch with his cultivation. However, the explosive power contained in Yan Juexing's punch was frighteningly powerful. It gave people the illusion that no matter how high their cultivation was, they would not be able to withstand it. It directly blasted through the defense that he had put up to defend and injured him. The Zhen Yuan in Bing Qingzi's body was still faintly dispersing. It was not that Yan Juexing's cultivation was higher than his. In fact, there was still a long way to go. However, the power in this punch was quite strange and overbearing. The powerful penetrating power and explosive power perfectly combined together. It was very frightening. It could not be judged by the level of cultivation. Yan Juexing raised his head and looked at the sky. With a swoosh, he appeared in front of Bing Qingzi with a teleportation. The lower half of his face was abnormally cold, especially his eyes, which were devoid of any emotion. Man Hu furiously pointed at Yan Juexing and shouted, "Yan Juexing, you ungrateful bastard! You actually dared to attack Master. If it wasn't for Master, how could you be where you are today? If not for Master, you would have lost your life in Spirit Fong Valley." Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped him from continuing. He stared at Yan Juexing and asked, "What happened just now?" To be honest, he was not happy that Yan Juexing attacked him. It was just that he was more composed than his disciple. A bitter smile appeared on the lower half of his face under his long hair. He cupped his hands at them and said, "Master, senior brothers, please forgive me. I don't know what happened just now. I couldn't control myself and attacked Master recklessly." The master and disciples looked at each other speechlessly. The angry expression on their faces gradually eased. They all suspected that there was something wrong with this demonic art. Bing Qingzi stared at Yan Juexing and said with an abnormally heavy expression, "Isn't it a little too fast to break through to early spirit severing realm in such a short time? Why do I feel that it's a little abnormal? Did you notice anything unusual?" Man Hu and the others were shocked. They quickly looked at Yan Juexing and realized that they could no longer see through his cultivation. The senior and junior brothers looked at each other in shock. It was too unbelievable that he could break through to early spirit severing realm in such a short time. Yan Juexing muttered slowly, "It's too fast. I don't know what's going on either. According to the demonic book, it would take at least 10 years to reach my current cultivation. It's impossible to be so fast. However, when I was cultivating, I seemed to feel a magical power in my body. Once I started cultivating demonic arts, that magical power guided me to break through the shackles and solved all the doubts I had when I was cultivating. It made my cultivation advance by leaps and bounds. It's like 1,000 miles in a day. It's so fast that I can't even believe it myself." Not to mention Man Hu and the others. Even Bing Qingzi felt as if he had heard a fantasy. He looked at Yan Juexing with an indescribable expression. Bing Qingzi sighed slightly and said, "I can't give you any advice on this. You can only rely on yourself to figure it out slowly. If you discover that something is amiss, it is better to stop first and think about it clearly before continuing to cultivate. Do not be impatient for quick results. Logically speaking, I should be happy that your cultivation is progressing at a godly speed, but I keep feeling that something is wrong. It is simply too fast. You should be more careful." Yan Juexing bowed slightly, as if he was obeying orders. He said, "It's because I found something wrong that I stopped cultivating secretly. I'm going to think carefully about where the problem is. Just now I rashly attacked Master because of this magical power. I couldn't help it at that moment. Please forgive me, Master." "Since you couldn't help it, don't mention it again." Bing Qingzi's eyes flickered. He said, "The power of that punch just now is indeed extraordinary. With your early spirit severing realm cultivation, you can actually break through my defense. It seems that you have mastered the demonic fist that matches spirit severing realm. I'm looking forward to the power of your great demonic fist." Yes. Yan Juexing put on an obedient look. In fact, when he attacked Bing Qingzi just now, it wasn't because he couldn't help it. It was because of the rapid growth of his cultivation. He was overconfident and wanted to find someone to test the power of his demonic fist. When he fell off the ice cliff, he suddenly saw Bing Qingzi appear in the sky. He suddenly had an idea. He couldn't test the power of the demonic fist if his cultivation was too low. Bing Qingzi's cultivation was perfect for him to test. However, he was also worried that the demonic fist would be too overbearing and seriously injure Bing Qingzi, as described in the demonic book. After all, he still had to rely on Bing Qingzi's power in the future. He couldn't be reckless. Therefore, he only used 60% of his strength. As a result, Bing Qingzi was still slightly injured. At this moment, he was inexplicably surprised. However, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said that he couldn't help it. Bing Qingzi heaved a sigh of relief and turned to Man Hu. "How's the situation in the cultivation world recently?" he asked. "What's the situation in the cultivation world?" Recently, he had been guarding Yan Juexing and knew little about the situation in the cultivation world. Therefore, he asked this question. Man Hu immediately bowed and reported. After the countries joined hands and suffered losses in the cultivation world of Huaxia, they have temporarily stopped fighting. They are discussing with each other about the next attack. Generally speaking, the cultivation world is still peaceful. However, there are some movements in the secular world. Firstly, the rebel army supported by Yu Qianqiu has already swept 2/3 of the territory. If there are no other accidents, the outcome is already a foregone conclusion. Secondly, the emperor of Baiwan country has passed away. The new crown prince is about to succeed the throne. Apart from these, there are no movements for now. Bing Qingzi nodded slightly without saying anything. Yan Juexing, who had been listening attentively, asked indifferently with killing intent flashing in his eyes. "Eldest senior brother, is there any news about Yu Qianqiu in the cultivation world recently?" Everyone knew the resentment between him and Yu Qianqiu. It could be said that the hatred between them was getting deeper and deeper. It had reached the point where one of them would not stop until one of them died. However, that Yu Qianqiu could be considered to be worthy of admiration. Yan Juexing's devil arts were strange and overbearing, yet he had suffered a loss at Yu Qianqiu's hands time and time again. The last time, Yu Qianqiu had even almost lost his life. Man Hu took a deep look at him and said after a pause, "Our ice palace has been paying attention to the news of Yu Qianqiu. However, that guy seems to have disappeared. Not to mention the countries, even the cultivation world of Huaxia doesn't have any news about him. We don't know where he has gone." Yu Qianqiu. Yan Juexing slowly raised his broken and regenerated arm. He clenched his fist so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. He gritted his teeth and said, "I'm destined to compete with you in this life. Either you die or I live. You can't hide even if you want to." Then he suddenly turned around and cupped his hands at Bing Qingzi. "I want to go out and find Yu Qianqiu for revenge." Bing Qingzi frowned and said in a low voice, "Don't be reckless. There must be something we don't know about Yu Qianqiu, who can make a name for himself in the cultivation world with the cultivation of crossing calamity stage. Moreover, he is from the demon ghost territory. If something happens to him, the current torture envoy of the demon ghost territory, Niu Yud, will definitely not ignore it. You don't have to take revenge now. When you are successful in your demonic cultivation, and no one in the world can stop you, Yu Qianqiu will be at your mercy. If you go out now and encounter an accident, you won't be so lucky every time." The ending was nothing but a warning to him. "I can't save you in time every time. Master, please understand." Yan Juexing bowed deeply and said, "As long as Yu Qianqiu doesn't die, I will feel like I have a fishbone stuck in my throat. What's more, with my current cultivation and the new demonic cultivation, I'm confident that I can escape from anyone even if I encounter an accident. Master, please let me go out of the mountain to avenge this deep hatred." Bing Qingzi knew he couldn't persuade him since he was so resolute, but he couldn't ask him to do it as a normal master and disciple relationship. Alas, he could only let out a long sigh and flashed into the ice palace, as if to say, "Do as you see fit." The other disciples also frowned as they looked at each other. Man who reminded, Yu Qianqiu comes and goes like a ghost. Even if you leave the mountain, how will you be able to find him in this vast world? If I can't find him, I'll look for him slowly. I don't believe he will hide forever. If it's really impossible, as long as he's alive, I'll have a way to force him out. After Yan Zhuixing finished his words, he turned into a shadow and disappeared into the distance. The 6 riders galloped in a straight line on the vast lush plain. Green plants were rarely seen in the surroundings. Occasionally, they could see clusters of drought-resistant short thorns. 6 surging trails of yellow dust followed behind the galloping horse hooves. Yu Qianqiu swung his braids around in a flashy manner as he looked around. He clicked his tongue in admiration. Such a flat and vast yellow plain was truly rare. Under the setting sun, the lush plain was filled with a refreshing color. Between the heaven and the earth, there was a warm orange color. The rolling yellow dust could also be seen in the distance. The sound of horse hooves could be heard. Obviously, it was a passerby who had the same goal as them. Along the way, they galloped without any scruples. Soon, a green dot appeared in the distance. As the green dot gradually expanded in their sight, the magnificent city hidden behind the green forest appeared. After passing through the forest, there were farmlands on both sides of the road. There were thriving crops, and there was a small river that was 2 to 3 meters wide. Many people were busy working on it. Warriors from many tribes gathered on this road. They slowed down and came to the ancient lush wall that was more than 10 meters tall. A group of people surrounded the city gate. They were all warriors from various tribes who came to register. After going through the normal procedures, they would be let in by the city guards. As they approached the city gate, Boli and the other 3 tribesmen immediately looked around. Yu Qianqiu knew what they were looking for. They were looking for the tribesmen who lived in the city. They were the warriors who had participated in the fence meet. They had obtained the right to live in the city. Without the help of the tribesmen who lived in the city, it was impossible to register for the competition. The main purpose was to prevent people from disrupting the order in the city. This rule was very cruel. If Yu Qianqiu and the others were brought in by the cannibals who lived in the city, once Yu Qianqiu and the others caused trouble, the entire cannibal tribe would be implicated. It was said that the punishment was very severe. Therefore, under normal circumstances, for the safety of the tribesmen, no tribesman would easily bring outsiders into the city. This also prevented people from sneaking into the city to cause trouble. It was because of this reason that Yu Qianqiu decided to get close to the cannibals. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the patience to waste time with the cannibals. He would have disguised himself as a tribesman and entered the city long ago. Suddenly, someone jumped up and waved at the noisy city gate. Boli! Boli! Yu Qianqiu glanced over and saw a tall man wearing simple and crude clothes squeezing through the crowd. Boli and the other tribesmen shouted in surprise. Guan! They jumped down from their horses and hugged each other, patting each other's shoulders. They seemed very happy. Yu Qianqiu did not want to be outdone. He jumped down from his horse and opened his arms, pretending to hug them passionately. He smiled and patted their shoulders. He also winked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was still on his horse. It seemed to be saying, "Don't sit there alone, okay? It will make others suspicious." Immortal Lord Crocodile's face twitched, but he still forced a smile. He jumped down from his horse and pretended to be happy to see his tribesmen, just like Yu Qianqiu. Secretly, he gritted his teeth and sent a voice transmission. "You brat, aren't you tired of doing such things all day long? TSK, don't be surprised." Yu Qianqiu replied angrily. "If you don't do such things, it will attract the attention of the celestial masters in the city, and they will chase us everywhere. That will be really tiring." His words were crude, but he was right. Immortal Lord Crocodile was tongue-tied and speechless. He finally understood that what this guy said was the truth. It would be better for him to look for less stimulation in the future. Chapter 749. Guan, who was chatting with Boli and the other 3, noticed 2 unfamiliar faces joining them. He could not help but be startled, but from the way they were dressed, they were undoubtedly from the cannibals' tribe. He couldn't help but say, "Boli, Bolli grabbed his wrist and whispered. The elders agreed. Bring us into the city first, and we'll tell you what happened later. Guan looked solemnly at the other 3 tribesmen. Seeing that they were nodding, he immediately calmed down and brought the 6 people with the horses to register. When it was their turn to register, Guan showed his token to the registration staff at the city gate and successfully registered them. Immortal Lord Crocodile's name was changed to Dinyo, while the others' names remained the same. After all, the names of the others, including Yu Qianqiu, would not attract much attention. Only Immortal Lord Crocodile's name was famous in the immortal world, so he had to change his name. As for why he was called Dinyo, it was naturally because someone was called Nyo Yid. After passing through the city gate, a bustling city that was different from the lush plain outside appeared in front of everyone. The wide streets were filled with exquisitely built, simple, and luxurious shops. Bolli and the others were a little dazzled. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face was full of emotion. He probably did not expect that a city would appear in this place sealed off by the heaven and earth formation. The pedestrians on the streets could easily distinguish between those who were from the city and those who were from other tribes. First, there was the difference in clothing. The people in the city all wore cloth clothes, and few would wear things like animal skins. Second, there was the difference in their behavior. Those who walked on the streets and kept looking around, as if everything was new to them. Just like Yu Qianqiu, who had a head full of pigtails, one could tell at a glance that they were foreigners. Most of the people in the city, who wore cloth clothes, looked at the tribesmen with disdain. If not for the fact that the city lord needed these people to participate in the triennial fence meeting, they would have chased all these natives out of the city. Guan knew that his tribesmen rarely had the opportunity to enter, so he introduced the entire Luss Plain in detail as he walked. Luss City's land area was not small, as could be seen from the more than 300,000 permanent residents within the city. However, tribal warriors like Guan, who had obtained residency rights, did the dirtiest and most tiring chores in the city, making up less than 1/20th of the city's population. This was equivalent to more than 10,000 warriors from various tribes, serving the 300,000 locals in the city. The so-called city dwellers were actually the nobles and their family members who managed the various cities in the Holy East land. Even if they did nothing every month, they could still receive 1 gold coin per head, which was equivalent to 100 silver coins. And tribal warriors like Guan, who had obtained residency rights, were similar to those who worked in the city. However, even if they worked themselves to death, they would only be able to earn 50 silver coins a month at most. Most of them would only earn around 20 silver coins a month, but relatively speaking, it was still much better than hunting in the tribe. However, due to the high cost of living in the city, the warriors of each tribe only had a few silver coins left after filling their stomachs. In fact, their lives were far from being as comfortable as they were in the tribe. As long as they could hunt enough prey in the tribe, their lives were still relatively comfortable. In short, their lives were much worse than when they were in the tribe. However, the tribesmen needed them to stay in the city, because salt could only be bought in the city. Usually, the tribesmen were not allowed to enter the city. Even if there was extra game to sell, they could only rely on the tribesmen, who were struggling in the city, to do it. Yu Qianqiu felt that the immortals' rule and management of the city, and beyond, were a little ridiculous. Because the entire continent was sealed by the heaven and earth Qingquan formation, ordinary people couldn't get their hands on salt. After all, people couldn't live without salt, and the immortals relied on salt to rule and manage the entire continent. These so-called city dwellers actually lived in a huge cage. From birth to death, almost no one could take a step out of the city. Only those who were restricted to farming outside the city walls and providing the city with fresh fruits and vegetables were allowed to enter and leave the walled city. However, they were only able to leave the city to work in the fields. Although there was only a wall between the city and the city, it was like 2 different worlds. The city dwellers thought that they lived a decent life, but in fact, they paid for their lifelong freedom. They would never know how rich and colorful the outside world was, and how vast the outside world was. As for the tribes living outside, they maintained the most primitive way of life without being disturbed. Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure out what these trapped immortals wanted. Why did they want to turn the continent into two extremes? What puzzled Yu Qianqiu the most was, what was the purpose of the fence gathering? What were the 100 warriors who won every competition doing in the immortal city? The group was chatting as they walked. Suddenly, two boys crossed the street. When one of them saw Yu Qianqiu, he tugged on the other boy's sleeve and gestured for him to look at Yu Qianqiu. The two boys were about 7 or 8 years old. They looked at Yu Qianqiu as if they were looking at a monster, and they couldn't help but laugh out loud. The group stopped in their tracks. They didn't know what the two children were laughing about. Yu Qianqiu was even more confused. Could it be that his temperament was so extraordinary that even the children could tell that he was a fake native? Sigh. The children's eyes were pure, and they could tell people apart. Yu Qianqiu looked around proudly, showing off his extraordinary temperament. Unexpectedly, the two children looked at each other and smiled wickedly. They spat a few times, and only stopped when the saliva in their mouths was dry. Immortal Crocodile raised half of his eyebrows. The expressions on his face were very colorful. He seemed very happy to see Yu Qianqiu being treated like this. Boli and the others looked at each other, a little confused. Guan's expression didn't look good. Yu Qianqiu wasn't wearing any clothes. Looking at the spit on his body, he was a little confused. He didn't know what this meant. He comforted himself. Perhaps this was similar to the water splashing festival in Yunnan. It was a kind of etiquette. It meant that I was very popular with children. I'll endure it. If I really can't endure it, I'll just spit on them. However, illusions were always easily shattered. The ridicule of the passers-by made Yu Qianqiu feel that something was wrong. Yu Qianqiu pulled a long face and asked, "Little brat, why did you spit on me?" One of the children put his hands on his waist and pointed at Yu Qianqiu. He said disdainfully, "You're so small, and yet you came to participate in the fence meeting. Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself? Damn native, scram back to where you came from." Am I small? Yu Qianqiu asked himself. His height was not bad, but when he looked back at Boli and the others, he immediately understood. His height was not bad outside, but compared to the warriors of various tribes who were more than 2 meters tall, he was indeed thin and short. Son of AB *TCH. You think that I'm easy to bully because I'm small. How dare you spit on me? Yu Qianqiu's face completely darkened. Who knew that he wasn't the only one being bullied by these two children? The other child ran in front of Guan and pointed at his braided hair. He said, "You're obviously a poor and dirty native, but you still want to learn to wear our clothes. Scram out of Lust City. Tui tui." He started to spit on Guan again. Obviously, the miserable Guan was despised by the little boy because he wore cloth clothes and had braided hair. But even so, Guan's face was livid. He didn't dare to flare up because he couldn't afford to offend the natives in the city. When the child facing Yu Qianqiu saw that his companion was spitting to his heart's content, he immediately wanted to compete with him. He started to spit again at Yu Qianqiu. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu looked around, and his gaze paused on a small alley on the side of the road. Not only was he not angry, but a warm smile appeared on his face. Facing the spitting saliva, he stretched out his hand and showed the thing in his hand. He smiled amiably and said, "Little friend, do you want it?" That child was stunned for a moment and revealed a stunned look. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and stopped spitting. He even called his companion over. Yu Qianqiu then showed the other child what he was holding in his hand, only to see a handful of gold coins appear in his hand out of nowhere. "Little friend, do you want it?" Yu Qianqiu once again guided them patiently. One of the children was very shrewish. He put his hands on his waist and said, "Damn native, how do you have so much money? Where did you steal it from? Quickly give it to me, or else I'll report it to the authorities." Shoo. Yu Qianqiu raised his index finger and gestured for them to be quiet. He pointed to a small alley on the side of the road and said softly, "Let's go there to talk. I have a small question to ask you. As long as you answer me, I'll give you these gold coins. How about that?" The two children looked at each other slyly and immediately nodded. "Let's go." They ran into the alley first and even waved at Yu Qianqiu, signaling him to come quickly. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile and walked in. Boli and the others looked at each other. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu wanted to do, because they didn't see clearly what Yu Qianqiu was holding in his hand. But from what the child said, it seemed to be money. Immortal Crocodile's eyelids twitched. He saw clearly that Yu Qianqiu was holding a handful of gold coins in his hand. Based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu, he didn't think that Yu Qianqiu would be so friendly as to give gold coins for free. Could it be that this guy would even kill children? After one adult and two children entered the alley, the younger one immediately said, "Ask quickly if you have any questions." Yu Qianqiu looked back at the occasional pedestrians on the street behind him and pointed inside. "Go a little further in. If other adults see that you two children have so many gold coins, they might rob you." The two children agreed tacitly, thinking that Yu Qianqiu's words were very reasonable. They were obviously very familiar with the terrain here. They led Yu Qianqiu into a corner, and the child who spoke earlier said, "Ask here." Chapter 750. Yu Qianqiu looked around, and found that it was a dead end with no one around. He raised his eyebrows and rubbed his chin. He stared at the two children and muttered, "I don't know which family these children belong to, but they are so uneducated. Since your parents treat you like treasures, and don't want to educate you properly, then you should be prepared to make others unhappy, and teach you a lesson. I won't stand on ceremony. I hope I can teach you a lesson in one go." He swung both of his arms and slapped out with both hands. "Papa!" The two children, who hadn't reacted in time, blacked out and fainted on the ground. Half of their faces were swollen. Obviously, someone didn't go easy on them. Shame. The dignified torturer of the Phantom region was actually forced to kidnap children and use underhanded methods in the alley. It was really a shame. Yu Qianqiu stared at the two children who had fainted on the ground and shook his head. He coughed and walked out of the alley with a serious face. Boli and the others, who were waiting at the end of the street, craned their heads to look behind him, but didn't see the two children. Boli couldn't help but ask, "Where are those two despicable children?" Yu Qianqiu subconsciously dug his ears, then waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "Under my influence, they realized their mistakes and went home. Let's go. Don't worry about them, they are just ignorant children. There's no need to fuss over them." Immortal Crocodile felt a chill down his spine. What did he mean by no need to fuss over them? With his cultivation, he could clearly hear the sound of the two slaps. He had already guessed what Yu Qianqiu had done. The two children on the ground still hadn't moved. It's good that they know their mistakes. Boli sighed slightly, and they continued to move forward. Guan had lived in the city for a long time, so he naturally felt that something was wrong. He kept sneaking suspicious glances at Yu Qianqiu. However, the latter's face was calm and unperturbed, and he couldn't tell what had happened. Guan felt that he might be thinking too much. The tribesmen were simple and honest, unlike the people in the city who were cunning. Guan lived at the edge of the city. When Yu Qianqiu first arrived, he thought he was in the slums of India from his previous life. If there was a hint of curry in the air, it would be even more so. There were shacks everywhere, and it looked like a slum. The people going in and out were all from different tribes. Obviously, the local city dwellers would not live here, because the cannibals were good at producing top warriors. The only cannibal representative left in Lust City was Guan. The ones before him were either stronger than Guan and directly passed the finals to the Immortal City, or they were even weaker than Guan and directly died in the fence meet. After tying up the horses outside Guan's shed, Boli and the others went in to take a look. Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile could imagine how big the space inside was. Even if everyone went in, it would be difficult for them to stand still, so they did not go in. Yu Qianqiu looked around and kept thinking about a problem. Where would everyone stay after coming here? Would everyone have to build a shed to live in during the fence rally? The answer was yes, because the people of the other tribes were building shacks. When Boli and the others came out, their faces were not very good. From the shabby conditions in the shacks, they could see how difficult Guan's life here was. They looked at Guan with admiration. It was precisely because of the sacrifices of generations of warriors here that the tribesmen could live a carefree life. As soon as they came out, They immediately untied the dried meat from the horses' backs and moved it into the shacks. To them, they could not imagine what kind of life a warrior, who mainly ate meat, would live here on a vegetarian diet. In their excitement, they wanted to leave the good things for Guan, but Guan firmly rejected them. His reason was that the tribesmen were going to participate in the fence meet and needed meat to replenish their strength. Yu Qianqiu saw them arguing over a few pieces of meat and could not stand it anymore. So he immediately came out to make the decision. Guan kept the dried meat, and from today onwards, he would pay for everyone's food expenses during the fence meet. He also made a generous decision that everyone would go and have a big meal now. This kind of extravagant behavior was too extravagant and wasteful for Guan, who had been working hard here. Fortunately, Boli and the others knew that he was rich. After Boli secretly told Gu and about Yu Qianqiu's heroic deeds, Guan no longer insisted on his own opinion. He just looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise and doubt. This was a warrior who had lost his memory, and he was very powerful. Not only did he save the entire tribe, but he also took the risk to participate in the fence meet in place of his tribesmen. He was also very rich. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan and said with a smile, "Guan, you are more familiar with Lust City. Take us to the restaurant with the best food." Guan was a little hesitant. Although he had never been to the restaurant with the best food, he had heard others talk about it. However, he had heard that the food there was ridiculously expensive and not something that ordinary people could afford. Could he really take out that much money? Yu Qianqiu observed his expression and knew what he was worried about. He waved his hand and said with a smile, "Just take us there, you don't have to worry about the money." Under his repeated insistence, Guan had no choice but to lead the group of people there in fear. At this time, Lust City was already shrouded in the twilight, and the streets that extended in all directions were brightly lit. Yu Qianqiu was surprised to find that the entire Lust City was actually illuminated by fluorescent stones. Once night fell, the streets would automatically be brightly lit without the need for lighting, which really saved a lot of trouble. The streets were filled with people, and many well-dressed locals had come out for a walk. It was much more lively than during the day. It seemed that for these people who had never been out of the city, taking a walk was one of the ways to pass the time. There were also many people from various tribes looking around on the streets, and they constantly attracted the locals' looks of disgust. Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile felt a little strange, for no other reason than that they were dressed too skimpily. It was fine when they were in the cannibals' tribe. After all, everyone was like that. However, here, there were constantly neatly dressed people passing by, and they felt uncomfortable all over. This was especially so when they bumped into the hungry woman who passed by them. When they felt her gaze on them, as if she wanted to eat them up, they felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Others could not care less, but for the two of them, they always felt out of place. Even their steps felt unnatural. At this time, Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile stopped at the same time. The others also stopped, not knowing what they wanted to do. The two of them looked at each other, then at the clothes that Guan was wearing. Their gazes then shifted to a clothing store by the side of the road. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and suddenly waved at everyone. He was the first to enter the clothing store, and Immortal Lord Crocodile followed closely behind him. Boli and the others looked at each other, not knowing what the two of them wanted to do, but they followed them in. The owner of the store was a kind-looking old man in yellow. When he saw the natives coming in, he was stunned at first, then walked over with a smile and said, "Are you here to buy clothes?" He did not have the snobbish look that most people in the city had. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "Do you have anything else to sell here?" The old man in yellow was stunned again. He looked around his store, then laughed and said, "I didn't expect that after doing business for so long, there would always be problems with the way you speak. Haha, indeed, I only sell clothes here, nothing else." Yu Qianqiu was about to ask for his best clothes for everyone, when he suddenly heard Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice. "Be careful, this person is an immortal cultivator. I've seen him before, but I don't know his name. I can't see through his cultivation." Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. Fortunately, Immortal Lord Crocodile was here, or else the other party would be suspicious. He swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Even Immortal Lord Crocodile couldn't see through his cultivation, so it was obvious that the other party's cultivation was at least at the early stage of the great immortal realm. However, it was not good to suddenly run away now. Hence, he put on a weak expression and said, "Old man, can you give each of us the cheapest clothes? I want the cheapest kind." Bully and the rest felt that it was a little strange. Previously, he seemed to be quite generous, but now, Ngu was grumbling in his heart. He could only buy the cheapest kind of clothes, but he still wanted to eat and drink in the best place. What if he had no money to pay the bill? The old man looked at them and laughed. "It's not easy for you to earn some money. Why do you need to spend money to buy clothes? Isn't it better like this? Damn it. Immortals were indeed immortals." He even rejected business that came knocking on his door. Yu Qianqiu coughed and sighed. "Old man, you might not know this, but the people in the city look down on us if we don't wear clothes." The old man smiled noncommittally. His eyes flickered. "From the way you talk, you don't sound like the ordinary aborigines. May I know which tribe you are from?" How could Yu Qianqiu tell him the truth? He directly asked the question and said pitifully, "Old man, you are also different from the ordinary people in the city. You don't look down on us like the others. This makes us feel better. May I know your name? I really want to know." "You are an interesting person." The old man shook his head and smiled. He said bluntly, "My name is Huang Tian. Huang as in Lust City and Tian as in heaven." After which, he glanced at the figures of the few of them. He turned around and took a few clothes from the rack. He stuffed them into Yu Qianqiu's hands and said, "It's rare to meet such an interesting aborigine like you. These clothes are free, and I will give them to you." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He looked at the clothes in his hands and asked suspiciously, "You really don't need money?" Huang Tian nodded his head and smiled. "Really? Thank you, old man." Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and bowed his head to bid farewell, after which he walked out with the rest of them. It seemed that he was worried that the old man would change his mind. The old man smiled and waved his hand to send them off. Chapter 751. Old Monster, I've already found out his name for you. Who is this Huang Tian? He's actually hiding here to act cool. As they walked on the street, Yu Qianqiu transmitted his voice and kept looking back. Immortal Lord Crocodile replied disapprovingly, "I've never heard of this person. Maybe he was a nobody in the celestial world back then. I only met him by chance. Otherwise, if he was really a famous person in the celestial world, there's no way I wouldn't know who he is." Yu Qianqiu thought about it and agreed. They passed by an alley and pulled everyone inside to change clothes. When they came out again, they all looked like humans, except for their hairstyles. It was the first time Boli and the others had worn such clothes, and they felt a little uncomfortable, pulling and tugging at their clothes from time to time. As for Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile, they felt much better with clothes to cover their bodies. A luxuriously decorated and brightly lit ancient building stood on the side of the street. It was obviously of a higher grade than the surrounding buildings. This building was called Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, and the fluorescent stone signboard said that it was the destination of this trip. After Guan led everyone to the opposite side of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, he stopped and looked at Yu Qianqiu with anxiety written all over his face. Obviously, he doubted Yu Qianqiu's financial ability. Before entering Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, the tempting aroma of food assaulted their nostrils. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and rubbed his hands excitedly. Eating, drinking, and playing are the four joys of life, and eating ranks first. Everyone, eat to your heart's content today. With a wave of his hand, he looked like a Japanese soldier sweeping through a village. Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately laughed coldly and dampened his mood. "Are you sure you want to eat here? Why not?" Yu Qianqiu replied subconsciously, but when he saw the sneer on Immortal Lord Crocodile's face, he immediately understood the meaning behind his words. The lesson from the boutique was still fresh in his mind, and Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant was even more crowded. Don't think that people wouldn't know you're a native just because you changed your clothes with a super cool hairstyle on your head. With the 7 natives spending here, it would be hard for them not to attract attention. The fragrance that wafted out from the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant was obviously delicious. However, it was not convenient for him to go in and have a good meal. This was one of the greatest regrets of his life. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head, and the word waste was written all over his face. After smelling the fragrance, Boli and the others swallowed their saliva unabashedly. Guan, on the other hand, said weakly, "Why don't we just forget it? I can still fill my stomach if I go to a cheaper place." He was still thinking about Yu Qianqiu, thinking that Yu Qianqiu did not have enough money. Little did he know that money was not a problem, but a problem of courage. Immortal Lord Crocodile squinted at Yu Qianqiu, his face full of mockery. Suddenly his expression froze. He saw Yu Qianqiu's eyes shining, so he followed his gaze and saw that Yu Qianqiu was looking at the customers going in and out of the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not see anything, and was about to ask him what he was looking at when he saw Yu Qianqiu laughing sinisterly. "Wait for me here, I'll be right back." After saying that, he ran away. The few of them looked at each other, not knowing what he was up to. Just as Boli and the others were waiting until their stomachs were growling, Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was looking around, suddenly paused. Someone sent a voice transmission to him. "Old monster over here. Bring them over." Tilting his head to look, he saw Yu Qianqiu sneakily stretching his head out from the alley across the street, waving at him. "He's over there, let's go over." Immortal Lord Crocodile called out to the few of them. When they saw Yu Qianqiu hiding in the alley, they were a little confused and walked over. After entering the alley, they found Yu Qianqiu standing in the shadows with his hands behind his back, smiling lewdly at them. "What are you trying to do, kid?" Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned. Yu Qianqiu cackled twice and took out his hands from behind his back. They saw that he was holding a few hats. He said proudly, "It's very simple. How could it be a problem for me? Everyone, just put on your hats and keep your hair in." As he spoke, he handed out hats to everyone. The few of them held a hat in a daze. Boli and the others did not know why they had to wear hats. Immortal Lord Crocodile was simply impressed by Yu Qianqiu's appearance. It seemed that this guy had gone to get hats just now. They did not know if he had bought them or stolen them. The hat in his hand looked a little old from the looks of it. "If you want to have a good meal at Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, quickly put it on." As he spoke, Yu Qianqiu had already put on the hat. As he stuffed his braids, he asked Immortal Lord Crocodile, "Dainyu, help me see if I've stuffed it in. Why are you all in a daze? Quickly put it on. What are you waiting for? Don't you want to eat?" Immortal Lord Crocodile knew the reason for wearing hats, but Guan's face was full of fear. He thought of the terrible consequences of changing his appearance and eating without paying. Boli and the others could not figure out what eating had to do with wearing hats. However, under Yu Qianqiu's coercion, they put on the hats properly. "Tsk, this is a good idea. We can use it more in the future. Let's go and open up a path. Let's eat to our heart's content today. I have money." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and swaggered out of the alley like a local tyrant. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the swaggering Yu Qianqiu and shook his head with a wry smile. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He was completely convinced by this fellow. It was just eating. He would not starve to death even if he did not eat. Why did he have to put in so much effort? He was really unscrupulous to achieve his goals. The Heavenly Fragrant restaurant was beautifully decorated and luxurious. The two ushers at the door led the 7 honored guests in a single file. Although the 2 greeters felt that the 7 distinguished guests did not look like rich people, and their hats did not match their clothes, they felt that the person in front of them was very confident when he walked. They did not dare to slight him and greeted him with a smile. As soon as they entered Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, a graceful young lady greeted them. The high-end and elegant decorations were refreshing and could indeed shock the poor. However, Yu Qianqiu did not care at all. He was here to eat, not to look at their shabby decorations. Moreover, he was really rich and had seen a lot. Naturally, he would not be shocked. However, Boli and the others were a little dazed. They were used to living in nature and had never seen such a scene. "Distinguished guests, do you have a reservation?" The graceful young lady beside Yu Qianqiu asked with a graceful smile. I eat according to my mood. I eat when I feel like it. I never make a reservation. Yu Qianqiu glanced upstairs and thought that he would not feel at ease eating downstairs. So he waved his hand majestically and said, Upstairs, give me the best private room and the best dishes. The smile on the young lady's face froze. She paused and squeezed out a smile again. The upstairs is full. If you do not have a reservation, I can help you look downstairs. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu did not have any temper. This was not the place for him to be unreasonable, so he could only nod and acquiesce. The young lady quickly found an empty table in the crowded lobby for them. It was near the stairs to the second floor. Although the location was not good, it was better than no place at all. Anyway, they were here for the food, so they did not care. After sitting down, the young lady asked what they wanted to order. Yu Qianqiu only said one thing. Until the table was full of the best dishes. As expected of the best restaurant in Lust City, the service efficiency was very high. In a short while, the table was filled with all the dishes. Other than Immortal Lord Crocodile and Guan, who still maintained their poise, everyone else at the table rolled up their sleeves and ate heartily. It seemed that they did not know if they would have the chance to come again after eating this time. Immortal Lord Crocodile was really cultured. After all, he was once one of the 12 great immortal lords in the celestial world. But Guan was not being gentlemanly. Instead, he looked at the table full of dishes with a frown. He was thinking about the terrible consequences if he did not have money to pay the bill later. The Heavenly Fragrance restaurant had a very deep background. Ordinary people could not afford to offend them, let alone natives like them. Boli and the others were not nervous when faced with the food. They ate with their hands because they had never used chopsticks before. Yu Qianqiu pulled a piece of steak with both hands and bit into it. As he ate, he nodded at Immortal Lord Crocodile, indicating that it was delicious. He really did not expect that there would be such superb cooking in this sealed continent. The food here was so much better than outside. He even suspected that this was a culinary skill brought over from the celestial world. Little did he know that these people in besieged city were indeed very skilled in various industries, including cooking. Moreover, this was the best Heavenly Fragrance restaurant, so the taste was naturally not bad. The reason was simple. They were all trapped here, and there was not much they could do. All they could do was keep improving. All the customers in the lobby stared at the table of people eating dumbfounded. They had never seen such a noble customer in such a high-class place like the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant. Uncle, you must help us catch him. Uncle, that person is very easy to recognize. He is a skinny and short aboriginal, different from the other aborigines in the city. Don't worry. Since he is such an obvious aboriginal, Uncle will definitely help you catch him. The two people who called him Uncle earlier were obviously children's voices, and the deep and loud voice behind them was obviously an adult's. The sound of a group of people walking down the stairs came from upstairs. Yu Qianqiu and the others were at the table near the stairs, so they could clearly hear the voices of the people coming down. Yu Qianqiu, who was biting into his steak, suddenly felt that the voices of the two children were a little familiar. He could not help but look up. He saw a burly middle-aged man in armor, holding a child in each hand as he walked down the stairs. Behind him were 6 soldiers in the same armor, each with a sword at their waist. As for the two children, they were strange. One of their faces was swollen, and one of their eyes was so swollen that they could not open them. They only had one eye left to look downstairs. The two individuals' single eyes suddenly froze at the same time. Their gazes collided with Yu Qianqiu's, unable to separate. Yu Qianqiu was speechless, and he cursed in his heart. He could only blame himself for being soft-hearted. If he had known earlier, he would have killed these 2 unlucky children. These 2 children were none other than the 2 bad children, whom he had abducted and slapped unconscious in the alley earlier in the day. He did not expect to meet them here. Immortal Crocodile's gaze paused on the 2 children's swollen faces. He then supported his head with one hand and rubbed his temples with his fingers. He sighed in his heart. What a talent! Chapter 752. The commotion came from the stairs at the side. Boli and the others were not blockheads, so they naturally took a look. When they saw the two pig-headed children, they felt that they were familiar, but they didn't think of the two hateful children during the day. However, Guan had stayed in the city for so many years, and his mind was more flexible. From the situation at the scene, he vaguely guessed something, and his heart was beating wildly. He recognized the person who was holding the two children, and seemed to be the leader. It was Shang Huan, one of the 4 commanders of the city guards. The result was as bad as the people who knew what was going on expected. The two children almost simultaneously pointed at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding a stake, and screamed, "It's him, uncle! It's him who hit us!" Shang Huan's sharp gaze suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu. He had already noticed some clues from the skin color of these people, so he sneered and said, "What a group of sinister and cunning natives! They actually know how to disguise themselves. It's obvious that they're people with ulterior motives. Capture all of them." As soon as he gave the order, the 6 soldiers behind him immediately jumped down from the stairs and unsheathed their swords, surrounding the 7 natives in disguise. Such a situation immediately caused a commotion in the lobby of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. Boli and the others were simple but not stupid. At this moment, they naturally realized that the 2 children were the 2 bad children during the day. Everyone at the table stood up, except for Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile. Everyone else had a terrified expression. Shang Huan slowly walked down from the stairs. The 2 children waved their fists beside him and shouted, "Beat them to death! Beat them to death!" The commotion in the lobby alerted the shopkeeper. A chubby middle-aged man quickly walked out from the back and asked in a deep voice from afar, "What's going on?" After seeing Shang Huan, he was slightly startled and frowned. "So it's Commander Shang. Could it be that our Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant didn't treat us well and provoked Commander Shang to make a move here?" From the tone of his voice, it was obvious that he was someone with a background. Shang Huan glanced at him and slowly walked to Yu Qianqiu, pulling off Yu Qianqiu's hat. The braids on his head immediately exposed Yu Qianqiu's identity as a native. Shang Huan casually threw away his hat and fiercely elbowed Yu Qianqiu's chest. Although a mere mortal commander had some skills, it was not enough to injure Yu Qianqiu. However, it was enough to make Yu Qianqiu furious, but he forced himself to hold it in. He even pretended to groan and stagger, holding the table behind him. At this time, Shang Huan turned to the fat shopkeeper and said, "Shopkeeper is worrying too much. It's not that I want to cause trouble, but I just happened to find a group of natives who committed a crime in the city during the day, and I'm about to arrest them." As he spoke, he gave his subordinates a look, and the 6 subordinates quickly pulled off the hats of Boli and the others. The 7 native braids were exposed, and the lobby was filled with an uproar. The fat shopkeeper was slightly startled. Obviously, he didn't expect that there would be natives disguising themselves and eating in Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. He paused and said, "Commander Shang, I don't care who they are, but the rule of my Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant is that anyone who comes here is a guest. You hit my guests in my Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. How can I put my face?" "Great Commander, I will go and apologize. I won't damage your Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant's face," Shang Huan said indifferently, then turned to Yu Qianqiu and the others and said, "For the sake of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, I don't want to use force on you here, but you'd better obediently go back with me. That way you'll suffer less. If you dare to resist arrest, you'll have to bear the consequences." Then with a wave of his hand, the 6 armed soldiers immediately threatened them with their sabers. Yu Qianqiu and the other bandits were also quite cooperative, and they were obediently escorted out. As soon as they left Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, under the bright night sky, there was a commotion in the crowd, and it immediately attracted passers-by to ask what happened. No matter what the 7 people had done, the locals in the city all looked at them with disdain, as if they couldn't wait to capture all the natives in the city. Meanwhile, the warriors of the various races had bitter expressions, and they more or less felt sorry for them. Boli and the others were terrified, not knowing what the consequences of this matter would be. Immortal Crocodile's face, on the other hand, was gloomy. If it weren't for Yu Qianqiu, with his noble status, he wouldn't have to be paraded in public. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, whose head was lowered with his braids covering his face, he found that he had the potential to become a criminal. He couldn't help but sneer at him through telepathy. "Weren't you eating happily just now? Why are you so listless now? Cut the crap. You ate for free, so why are you still nagging?" Yu Qianqiu immediately retorted. Immortal Crocodile was speechless, regretting that he shouldn't have picked up his chopsticks. Lust City's public security had always been good, and it was rare to see such a scene. It was a night that had lost its passion day after day. But suddenly, because of the arrest of the 7 people, a large number of people pointed at them, as if they were watching a show. When they passed by a clothing store, the store's owner, Huang Tian, was also attracted by the commotion outside. He got up from the chair at the door, lifted his feet, and stood on the chair, watching from above the passers-by. When he saw that the 7 people who were arrested were Yu Qianqiu and the others, who he had given the clothes to, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. What a coincidence! The 7 people were finally brought to the darkest corner in the west of the city, and there were no longer any spectators around. At the end of the road was a tall wall, and facing the intersection was an iron fence. The surroundings were quiet, and the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. When the soldiers guarding the iron gate saw Shang Huan, they immediately saluted and opened the iron gate in the middle. Based on his experience, Yu Qianqiu judged that this should be Lust City's prison. Just as the crowd was about to enter the high wall, a soldier galloped over on horseback from behind, stopped in front of Shang Huan, and cupped his fists. "Commander Shang, the city lord has summoned you. He orders you to see him immediately." Shang Huan was slightly surprised, and after a pause he nodded solemnly. Then, he waved his hand at the soldiers and said, "Take them to the prison, and wait for me to come and interrogate them personally tomorrow." The group obeyed, and the soldiers jumped down to invite him onto the horse. Shang Huan jumped onto the horse, turned around and galloped away. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu meaningfully, because just when Shang Huan turned around, he saw with his own eyes Yu Qianqiu cut his fingertip and flicked a small drop of blood onto Shang Huan's back. He didn't know what trick this guy was playing. As soon as the 7 people entered the wall, they were immediately taken to the dungeon. After passing through a dark and damp tunnel, they were all chased into a dark underground stone room. The iron gate behind them clanked, and even the dim light in the tunnel disappeared. Now they really couldn't see their own fingers in front of them. The underground stone room had a moldy smell, and they didn't know how long it had been since someone had been locked up. Bolly and the others couldn't see their surroundings clearly, and squeezed together in fear. They wanted to cry, but no tears came out. They had never experienced what it was like to be in prison. "Are you satisfied now?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice echoed in the stone room. "Of course. Guan's place is too small, and I was worried about not having a place to stay at night. Sigh. I can eat and sleep for free, and live a good life." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. Although the stone room was dark, with their cultivation, they had no problem seeing each other clearly within a short distance. His teasing laughter made Bolly and the others, who had been trembling with fear, relax a little. Bolly blankly looked around in the darkness and asked, "Yu Qianqiu, you hit? Can we still go out? Won't it implicate our people?" "Don't worry. It's okay, we'll be fine, and they'll let us go." Yu Qianqiu comforted him. These words made Bolly and the others feel more at ease, but Guan's face was bitter. He knew that it wouldn't be that simple. The stone room was empty, and the ground was damp. There wasn't even a place to sit. The others didn't see it, but Immortal Lord Crocodile did. Yu Qianqiu took out a large pile of dried straw and laid it on the ground. He then lay down and said to Bolly and the others, who didn't dare to move, with a smile, "Bolly, don't be nervous. Just walk forward, there's a place for you to sit." Bolly and the others had also heard the sound of him tossing the straw. They walked forward slowly, and when their feet touched the straw, they slowly squatted down and tried to feel it with their hands before sitting down. Once they sat down firmly, they felt more at ease. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned and speechless for a while. He then walked to Yu Qianqiu and sat down beside him. He transmitted his voice suspiciously. "You brat, you still have straw with you?" He couldn't believe that someone would actually have straw in their storage bag. It was simply unimaginable. You don't understand. This is called being prepared. Yu Qianqiu rested his head on his arms and crossed his legs, looking relaxed. In fact, these straws were casually gathered from the farmland in Utopia. What are you trying to do, brat? Immortal Lord Crocodile asked. He didn't think that this fellow was someone who would obediently surrender. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu sneered and replied, You dare to hit me? Wait and see. This was destined to be a sleepless night for the few of them. Although no one spoke, no one could fall asleep. It was late at night, and it was quiet outside. Only the sound of a few people tossing and turning on the straw could be heard. Yu Qianqiu quietly got up and placed a few silver balls on the ground. Then, he waved goodbye to Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was staring at him with wide eyes, and instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, Yu Qianqiu was dressed in black and his face was covered. He didn't know where he was. Under the hazy moonlight, he only knew that he was in a garden, surrounded by pavilions that were low-key and luxurious. It was obviously not the residence of an ordinary person. He guessed that this should be Commander Shang's home. The reason why he stayed up until midnight was to wait for the commander to return home to teach him a lesson. He didn't hit him for nothing. Yu Qianqiu hid in a patch of flowers and secretly poked his head out to look around. He happened to see a person walking out of a pavilion not far away. It was none other than Commander Shang. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. Without saying a word, a flying sword shot out with a whoosh. Shang Huan saw a cold light, and before he could react, his head was separated from his body. The remaining body and the flying head fell to the ground at the same time. Who is it? A loud shout came from the pavilion. Yu Qianqiu's vision blurred, and a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Yu Qianqiu, who was about to slip away, was slightly shocked when he saw who it was. This person was none other than the clothing store owner, Huang Tian, who had given him clothes for free on the streets previously. Chapter 753. It's you. Huang Tian slowly raised a black cloth in his hand and sneered. I've always felt there was something wrong with a native like you. So you're a cultivator. Damn. He can recognize me even with my face covered? Yu Qianqiu felt the black cloth in his hand was familiar. He subconsciously touched his face and found that the black cloth covering his face was gone. He immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. The black cloth in the opponent's hand was clearly his mask. He didn't even know when the opponent took it away. If the opponent wanted to kill him just now, Yu Qianqiu immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to think any further. He knew his actions today were too rash. The cultivators of the celestial world had an undeserved reputation. They weren't people he could deal with. With this scare, he completely calmed down. His experience of 2 lifetimes of being fearless in the face of danger came into play at this crucial moment. He wasn't in a hurry to leave now, since the opponent didn't kill him just now. If he was in the opponent's shoes, he would definitely want to know the assassin's background, so his life wasn't in danger for now. Also, since he had already revealed his face, if he ran away, he wouldn't be able to establish himself in Lust Soil City. Then all his efforts would be wasted. Huang Tian, aren't you selling clothes? Why are you here? Yu Qianqiu asked in shock. Just as he finished speaking, there were already many footsteps running over, clearly attracted by the commotion here. Huang Tian's gaze flickered as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. He suddenly shouted, All of you back down. His voice shook the surroundings. People immediately replied, Yes, City Lord. The dense footsteps retreated. City Lord. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank and his gaze turned cold. Your Lust Soil City Lord? Although it was an unintentional question, it was no different from asking the obvious. Huang Tian glanced at Shang Huan's corpse on the ground and let go of the black cloth in his hand. He said expressionlessly, You're not a tribe native, nor a celestial cultivator, but a human cultivator. Just who are you? Yu Qianqiu immediately gave him a thumbs up. City Lord Huang has good eyesight. That's right, I'm a human cultivator. Huang Tian narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, Human cultivators? There is no place for cultivators in the mortal world on this continent. So you came in from the outside world when the heaven and earth grand formation was opened? Yes and no. Yu Qianqiu gave an ambiguous answer. Huang Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he said in a low voice, "A mere cultivator of the mortal world has quite the guts to actually barge into the city governor's estate to kill someone. Could it be that you're not afraid of death? This is the city lord's mansion?" Yu Qianqiu looked around and felt a little depressed. He had purposely waited until late at night, because he wanted to wait for Shang Huan to return home, so that he could make his move. He didn't expect Shang Huan to stay until now. His judgment was wrong. If I knew this was the city lord's mansion, I wouldn't have come. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Huang Tian snorted coldly and didn't ask why he killed Shang Huan. He waved his sleeve, and the ground under his feet surged like waves. A few huge mud palms suddenly stretched out of the ground and hugged Shang Huan's body, swallowing it into the ground. Then, the ground returned to normal, and not even a trace of blood could be seen. What kind of spell was this? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Huang Tian turned to leave, and as he walked he said, "Follow me, don't think about escaping, or else you'll end up like Shang Huan's body." Yu Qianqiu consciously nodded and followed Huang Tian. When he passed by the place where Shang Huan was buried, it still felt a little surreal. He couldn't help but step on the ground to make sure it was solid. Huang Tian, who was walking in front, couldn't help but twitch. It seemed that this kid really wasn't afraid. Walking to a remote part of the garden, Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind, suddenly found that the ground in front of him was empty, and there was suddenly a big black hole. Huang Tian walked in neither too fast nor too slow. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again, as he stood at the entrance of the cave. He saw that the soil in the cave was constantly retracting as the yellow sky moved forward, forming a 3-meter-wide cave. The depth of the cave continued to extend underground. This scene was simply too magical. Huang Tian seemed to be the ruler of the earth. Wherever he went, the earth had to make way. Just as Yu Qianqiu was in a daze, he suddenly realized that his center of gravity was a little unstable. The ground beneath his feet seemed to be moving, and he was shocked when he looked around. It was as if he was standing on the conveyor belt of an elevator, bringing him deep underground. The soil behind him suddenly closed, and the starry sky suddenly disappeared. He had been buried alive in the soil. "Huang Tian, what are you trying to do?" Yu Qianqiu said warily. He could barely see Huang Tian's figure in the darkness. "Don't be afraid. If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it long ago. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Don't worry, follow me. I have something to ask you," Huang Tian said calmly as he continued going deeper. This consolation did not make Yu Qianqiu let his guard down. In just a short while, he estimated that he had already gone more than 100 meters deep. Yu Qianqiu tried to communicate with Utopia, and realized that there was no obstruction. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, "If you have something to ask me, why don't you ask me where I am? Why do you have to go deep underground?" "I naturally have secrets to ask when I go deep underground." Huang Tian, who was advancing forward, stopped and suddenly waved his hand to scatter a large number of fluorescent stones. The surrounding terrain instantly changed, retreating with the fluorescent stones and expanding the underground space, changing into various shapes. Yu Qianqiu was already attracted by this magical spell. When he realized that the ground that was bringing him forward had stopped, his vision suddenly opened up. He saw that an underground palace had formed in just a short while. It was an earthen yellow underground palace. Under the illumination of the fluorescent stones embedded in the surroundings, the entire underground palace could be seen. There were earthen yellow stairs, various earthen yellow sculptures, and earthen yellow tables and chairs. Huang Tian was sitting behind a table in front of him. He pointed at the chair next to him, and said with a faint smile, "There's no need to look anymore. Come and sit. I have something to ask you." Yu Qianqiu wasn't in a hurry to reply. He strolled around the palace, knocked on it, and touched it. He noticed that everything was lifelike, as if it was made by the heavens, and he couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. After satisfying his curiosity, he walked over with large strides and sat opposite of Huang Tian, before clapping and praising. As expected of an immortal from the immortal dimension, Your methods are truly miraculous. Huang Tian smiled and said, It's just a small trick. It's just that you haven't seen it before. It's just that I'm proficient in the earth elemental arts. There's nothing magical about it. As he spoke, he took out 2 sets of wine utensils from his storage bracelet and placed them on the table. 2 earthen yellow hands immediately stretched out from the table. If it wasn't for the difference in color, their lifelike appearance could be passed off as genuine. One of the 2 hands took out a cup, and the other a pot, and moved in front of Yu Qianqiu to pour wine. After filling up the wine cup was placed in front of Yu Qianqiu. The 2 earthen yellow hands disappeared into the table. The wine utensils in front of Huang Tian were the same. Chapter 754. Yu Qianqiu stared at the wine cup in front of him in a daze. Huang Tian smiled faintly, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had been intimidated by his earth control technique. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu's little heart was trembling when he heard the words earth element. In a split second, a deep night sky star map became incomparably clear in his mind, and his heart surged in an instant. Although it's not the wine of the immortal world, it's still a fine wine of the mortal world. There's no poison in it, so try it. Huang Tian's words pulled Yu Qianqiu back from his daze. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and a trace of disdain flashed through his eyes. He picked up the wine cup without hesitation and drained it in one gulp. So what if there was poison in it? Yu Qianqiu didn't believe that it could be more poisonous than the soul-dispelling smoke. He wasn't even afraid of the soul-dispelling smoke, so why would he be afraid of a small cup of poison wine? Good wine. Yu Qianqiu smacked his lips and praised. Just as he put down the wine cup, he saw a hand reach out from the table and help him fill up the wine. Then, the hand disappeared from the table again. Yu Qianqiu resisted the urge to grab that hand and touch it. He looked around and asked curiously, The underground palace is all earthy yellow. Is it because of the soil? That's right. Huang Tian stroked his beard and smiled. When I was sent here to take care of affairs, I was tempted to build Yellow Soil City, because I saw the large yellow soil plains here. Yu Qianqiu's heart stirred and he asked again. City Lord Huang is proficient in the earth element technique, but you're interested in this place. Is there some difference between yellow soil and normal soil? Huang Tian nodded and smiled. It's rare to see people care about this. That's right. For those who cultivated the earth manipulation technique, although they could control any kind of soil, for beginners, yellow soil was the easiest soil for them to learn and familiarize themselves with. For example, black soil and red soil were much weaker in terms of affinity. Also, yellow soil is more powerful for those who cultivate the earth control technique. The rarest thing is that the yellow soil here is very pure, with almost no other types of mixed soil. Coupled with the existence of such a large area, I was tempted to build a city. Yu Qianqiu had a thoughtful expression on his face. He vaguely remembered that he had read about the 5 elements in a book in his previous life. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth each represented the 5 directions of west, east, north, south, and central, and each corresponded to the 5 colors of white, green, black, red, and yellow. He had already practiced the 3 magic arts of metal, water, and fire. It was precisely by relying on the understanding of the north, west, and south star maps that he comprehended at the same time that he simultaneously practiced these 3 magic arts. His body also produced 3 crystals of white, black, and red, which were astonishingly consistent with the records of the 5 elements in the books of his previous life. In that case, he was certain that he was still lacking the cyan wood element of the Eastern star chart and the yellow earth element of the Western star chart. Now, coupled with what Huang Tian had said about the yellow soil being beneficial for cultivating the earth control technique, didn't that mean that the best time for him to cultivate the earth formula had arrived, in this yellow soil plain? Thinking back to the night sky star map that had suddenly flashed in his mind, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but become excited. The 5 star maps had already been deeply imprinted in his mind. There was no mistake. The star map that had involuntarily flashed in his mind was the Eastern star map, the position of the Earth formula's star map. His previous cultivation experience of the 3 5 elements magic arts told him that the 5 elements magic arts couldn't be forced. Every time he was attracted by the same element, the corresponding star map would automatically flash in his mind. At the same time, this also meant that the opportunity to cultivate the 5 elements magic arts had arrived. How could he not be excited? He deeply felt that even if he didn't find the purple fire in the Eastern Holy Land, it wouldn't be a wasted trip. If he hadn't deduced wrongly, once he successfully cultivated the Earth formula, his cultivation would break through to the soul formation stage. Seeing that he hadn't come back to his senses after a while, Huang Tian asked suspiciously, "Could it be that you're also interested in cultivating the Earth control technique?" That's not it. I just suspect that City Lord Huang's surname is Huang, so that's why I like the yellow soil," Yu Qianqiu casually said. This kind of nonsense was something he could easily come up with. What kind of logic was this? Huang Tian was stunned. He smiled and said, "It's true that my surname is Huang, but I still don't know little brother's surname and name. My name is Yu Qianqiu." After Yu Qianqiu returned to his senses, he asked, "I wonder what secret city Lord Huang wants to ask me by bringing me underground. It can't be that you only want to ask my name, right?" Huang Tian stared at Yu Qianqiu with a smile for a while before he slowly said, "Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, judging from your reaction when I attacked earlier, if I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right?" Huang Tian smiled and looked at Yu Qianqiu for a while before he slowly said, "Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, but judging from your reaction when I attacked, if I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right?" Huang Tian nodded. "I've guarded this place for many years, so I know a little more than others. That is, if your cultivation hasn't reached the soul formation late stage, even if the East Holy Land opens, you won't be able to enter through the entrance. If you force your way in, you'll definitely be crushed into dust by the power of the heaven and earth formation. Then I believe that a human cultivator, like you, has another way to enter the East Holy Land. Am I right?" Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's heart shook. He didn't expect this to be a flaw. He narrowed his eyes and said, "So what if I'm right? So what if I'm wrong? Looks like I guessed right. You do have another way to enter the East Holy Land." I didn't expect to encounter it." Huang Tian finished the wine in front of him in one gulp. He put down the wine cup and took a deep breath. It was clear that he was trying his best to calm his agitated emotions. His fingers knocked on the table firmly and said, "This is the reason why I brought you underground. The secret I want to ask is for you to tell me how to leave this East Holy Land." Yu Qianqiu looked around and said with a cold smile, "If I don't tell you, are you going to imprison me here?" "You can understand it that way," Huang Tian said indifferently. "But this isn't the most important reason. I'm afraid that the walls have ears outside. How can such an important secret fall into the ears of others? Could it be that you want to keep this secret to yourself?" Yu Qianqiu put on a fake smile and said, "Don't you want to tell this secret to the immortal monarchs of the East and West palaces? Wouldn't that be a great merit?" "A great merit? Haha." Huang Tian laughed loudly. No one knew what he was laughing about, but there was some bitterness hidden in his laughter. After laughing, he shook his head and said, "This isn't something you should be concerned about. You just need to tell me the secret." Yu Qianqiu said with an "Oh. Why do I feel that once I tell the secret, it will be my death day? Because you don't want a second person to know this secret. Do you have a choice?" Huang Tian said indifferently, "I don't have a choice. But what I want to tell you is that there is actually no secret, because I don't know how I got in here." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "Are you satisfied with this answer?" Huang Tian's expression turned cold. He stood up and said, "Yu Qianqiu, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." Yu Qianqiu also stood up slowly and said, "Either way, I will die if I don't tell you. If I don't tell you, I might live a little longer. You can do whatever you want." The reason why he was so stubborn was that he was prepared to leave at any moment. After all, the other party would not kill him before the secret was revealed. Unexpectedly, Huang Tian snorted coldly and raised his hand to form a claw above the table. In the blink of an eye, a ball of earth appeared on the table, and a wisp of golden fog was injected from his palm. After doing all this, Huang Tian turned around with his hands behind his back. As he walked, he said, "It seems like you still need some time to think about it. Once you've figured out how to break the ball of earth on the table, I'll be happy to listen to your secret. But remember, my patience is limited. Don't make me use extreme measures to force you. Don't think about escaping. This place is more than enough to trap you." A hole appeared in the wall in front of him. As he walked out, the wall quickly healed seamlessly. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought that the other party was going to torture him, but he did not expect him to be so gentle. Did he really think that he couldn't escape from this underground palace? He contacted Utopia again, and realized that it was still unobstructed. He immediately relaxed. He thought to himself that Huang Tian was underestimating him too much. He looked around, and walked to the spot where Huang Tian had disappeared. He waved his hand and slapped the wall heavily. The impact caused his arm to feel a little numb, but it did not leave a single mark. The wall was actually as hard as iron. He then took out the green fire flying sword to test it out. In the end, it easily stabbed in with a pft. It was not as hard as he had imagined. However, the moment the flying sword was pulled out, the wall seemed to be alive. It was soft and hard, and it quickly recovered to its original state. Yu Qianqiu faced the wall speechlessly. It was easy to stab the sword in, but with his cultivation, if he were to fall in, he would probably be crushed to death by the immense pressure from the surroundings. It was no wonder that Huang Tian thought that he could not escape. Tisk! Yu Qianqiu waved his hand in disdain, and put away the green fire flying sword. He casually threw a small silver ball to the corner, and disappeared from the underground palace. On the surface, after Huang Tian came out, he slowly walked to the pavilion in the garden. He stood with his hands behind his back as if he was waiting for something. Not long after, a stream of light suddenly shot over from the horizon. A black-clothed man appeared in the garden. When he saw Huang Tian in the pavilion, he immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, City Lord Huang." Huang Tian laughed out loud and cupped his hands. "Brother Yufeng is an envoy of the Celestial City. How can you greet a small border official like me? I have already prepared good wine and delicacies for you. Please." "I dare not." The black-clothed man said politely, and walked side by side with Huang Tian to the brightly lit pavilion. If Yu Qianqiu saw this scene, he would know that it was not that Huang Tian was gentle and did not torture him, but that he had something to do and did not have time to tangle with him for the time being. In the dungeon west of the city, Yu Qianqiu appeared again. The moment immortal Lord Crocodile saw him, he immediately transmitted his voice. "Where did you go, kid?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at Boli and the others who were still tossing and turning on the pile of hay and transmitted his voice. "I've already killed that bastard Shang Huan. But who would have thought that I would run into Lust City's city lord? Do you know who he is? It's that old man Huang Tian, who gave us clothes for free. I almost suffered a great loss at his hands." "You escaped from him?" Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock. "Nonsense. If I didn't escape, would I still be here talking to you?" Yu Qianqiu said impatiently. "I came to tell you the truth. I have something to do, and will be leaving for a period of time. I don't know when I'll be back, but it won't take too long. You guys can stay here for a while. This is for them to eat and drink. It should be enough until I return." A storage bag was thrown to Immortal Lord Crocodile. Chapter 755. What did he mean by uncertain return date? What did he mean by temporarily suffering here? Immortal Crocodile was a little dumbfounded. Before he could say anything, Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. He quickly checked the contents of the storage bag, only to find that the contents were enough for Boli, and the rest to eat for more than a month. Looking at the pitch-black prison, he suddenly felt his scalp go numb. This kid wouldn't let us stay here for a month, would he? The night breeze was cool, and there was no one on the Lust Plain. Occasionally, a few mice would jump around under the hazy moonlight. Yu Qianqiu's sudden appearance immediately frightened the group of mice, and they quickly scurried into the nearby holes. After carefully observing his surroundings, Yu Qianqiu's body leaped into the air lightly, and landed in a ditch tens of meters behind him. When he had passed by this place on horseback, he had thrown a small silver ball here, just in case. He did not expect it to really come in handy. However, the surrounding terrain was too open, and the ditch was only a few meters deep. He did not know how long he would be staying here. He could not possibly just sit here and cultivate, right? It was still barely passable at night, but if it was during the day, he would be easily discovered by passers-by. His eyes suddenly landed on a mouse that happened to pop its head out of a hole to take a look. His eyes immediately lit up, and he scurried back and forth in the ditch that was hundreds of meters long before he found a side wall that had caved in. With a flick of his sleeves, 6 black flame-flying swords flashed out and formed a drill that rapidly drilled into the ground, causing dust to rise for safety reasons. He dug a tunnel that was more than 30 meters deep into the ground. Most of the crushed soil was sent into Utopia, and the rest was used to seal the entrance of the hole. At the end of the tunnel was a round nest with a diameter of 2 meters, which was enough for him to meditate and cultivate. Waha! Looking at his masterpiece, Yu Qianqiu could not help but dance and laugh wildly. He rubbed his hands together excitedly, sat down cross-legged, and slowly closed his eyes. Just as he silently memorized the middle-level star map in his mind, the vital energy in his body began to fluctuate uneasily. Yu Qianqiu was so excited that he was trembling slightly. If he remembered correctly, this was the same feeling he had when he was comprehending the gold art. It was as if there was a similar attribute around him that was attracting him. Because he was too excited, he actually couldn't get into the zone for a long time. He knew that there was a problem with his mentality. If he continued like this, he didn't know when he would be able to comprehend the cultivation method from the complicated star chart. This was a very complicated project, so he had to adjust his mentality. He immediately steadied his breathing and cleared away the excitement in his mind bit by bit. After a long time, the distracting thoughts in his mind were gradually discarded, and his mind entered a state of selflessness. The expression on his face relaxed, and he became expressionless. In his closed eyes, there was only the pitch-black night sky full of twinkling stars, as if they were guiding him to find the secrets hidden within the endless stars. Amidst the tranquility and emptiness of his thoughts, the middle-ranked star map that he had memorized by heart began to flip through the pages every night. In the vast starry sky, there were fixed constellations in the sky every night, as well as stars that were constantly changing positions. In the instant that the star map alternated every night, his entire body entered a wonderful state. It was as if there was nothing in the world, and there was nothing in his heart. There was only himself, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and he was swimming in the sea of stars. The trajectories of the stars' changes gradually became clear in his mind, and his brain quickly calculated the changes of every star on the middle-level star map. With such complicated changes of the stars, if he didn't enter a state of selflessness and abandon all distracting thoughts, how could he experience the changes of every star? His mind was dead silent. When the star map overlapped each other every night, the trajectories of the stars' changes gradually became traceable. Those fixed stars in the starry sky transformed into bones, flesh, and meridians in his mind. Those moving and changing stars gradually formed the trajectories of his true essence. With the traceable trajectories, it was like spinning silk from a cocoon, and all the problems were easily solved. The calculations in Yu Qianqiu's mind became smoother and faster. The traceable trajectories of the star map expanded little by little, becoming clearer and clearer, and gradually becoming more complete. When he had completely mastered it, the trajectories of the stars in his mind were all connected together, like a constellation that was connected by strokes. After the other insignificant stars suddenly flashed, they seemed to have completed their mission with a faint smile, and retired into the vast night sky. In the universe, only the summarized trajectories were circulating. In the cave, Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged with his back against Mother Earth, as if he was eternally sitting cross-legged. His mind was completely integrated into the universe's vault of heaven, and he was neither happy nor sad. The true essence in his body had already begun to imitate the perfect trajectory of his martial arts. In the instant that he completed one circulation, All the pores on his body opened up. Only in this pitch-black cave could one see that his entire body was emitting an earthy yellow light. In the instant that the light could be seen, it shot into the surrounding soil layer and disappeared. It was also at this moment that the earth seemed to be summoned. In the deathly still cave, a dense life force gradually appeared, as thin and hazy as fog. This was a mist formed by the gathering of yellow fairies that were difficult to see with the naked eye. They were indistinct and unfathomable, singing joyous songs and jumping about. Fairies that had not appeared for billions of years. Since ancient times, we have been sleeping in the embrace of Mother Earth. If not for the boundless universe's summons, we would have always existed with Mother Earth. Everything on the earth, because of our support, is able to grow and multiply endlessly. Even if the heavens and earth collapse and the stars no longer exist, we can still turn into tiny specks of dust and wander in the vast universe, never to be born or destroyed. As long as there is a place where we exist, there will always be a day when a new celestial body is born. We represent eternity. The hazy mist that was summoned from the cave became thicker and thicker, but it still lingered around Yu Qianqiu's body and refused to approach. It seemed that there were still doubts about this monster, Yu Qianqiu. Could it be that he was really representing the universe to summon us? They were deeply doubtful. When a wisp of mist tried to approach Yu Qianqiu, it was quickly absorbed into Yu Qianqiu's body, and there was no abnormal reaction. This proved to the other fairies that it was indeed Yu Qianqiu who was summoning them. Yu Qianqiu was like Mother Earth and could completely rely on them. All the doubts in the cave were gone. In an instant, the mist in the cave rushed madly towards Yu Qianqiu. It drilled into every pore of his body, looking for the home that belonged to it after it woke up. Once it was chosen, it would continue to advance without any regrets and accompany him for life. When a surging yellow stream began to appear in his meridians, a knowing smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. He knew that he had succeeded. He had successfully cultivated the earth formula of the 5 elements magic arts. After confirming that there was no mistake in his understanding of the earth formula, Yu Qianqiu quickly increased the speed of the magic arts, striving to reach the level of proficiency as soon as possible. The speed of the magic arts became faster and more proficient. The majestic yellow stream finally converged into a river in his meridians and converged towards Yu Qianqiu's central dantian. In the instant that the yellow stream rushed into his dantian, the body of the little boy, who had been sitting cross-legged and cultivating by himself, suddenly blossomed with a dazzling golden light and disappeared in a flash. The little boy suddenly opened his black and white eyes, which were full of spiritual energy, revealing a look of pleasant surprise. The red, black, and white crystals that were circling around his body also suddenly increased the speed of their circulation. It seemed that they were also very excited. The yellow stream gradually filled his entire dantian. The little boy suddenly opened his mouth, and using both his mouth and nose, he sucked in big mouthfuls of the yellow fog into his stomach. He kept sucking until his stomach was slightly bloated. Only then did he burp, choking out a few wisps of yellow smoke, and stop absorbing the yellow fog. Then, the little boy slowly closed his eyes, as if he was digesting the food. Seeing that there was no one else to receive them, the yellow fog that had continuously flowed into Yu Qianqiu's body, starting from the walls of his dantian, and seeping into his limbs and bones, looking for its own home in every cell. Only when the earth element had filled every cell did Yu Qianqiu stop the circulation of the earth formula. He slowly exhaled, opened his eyes, and excitedly waved his fists. Then, as if he had thought of something, he paused for a moment, then immediately closed his eyes and began to examine the movements in his dantian. According to his experience with the other 3 magic arts, after mastering the earth formula, he should have a breakthrough in his cultivation. The little boy's bloated stomach slowly sank, and when it became flat again, the little boy suddenly opened his eyes, opened his mouth, and spat out a yellow crystal bead. The crystal bead was like a living creature, happily flying around in his dantian. The little boy looked at it with a smile, and suddenly, his small hand gently waved at the yellow crystal bead, and the yellow crystal bead obediently fell into his palm. The little boy twirled the crystal bead and looked at the other 3 beads that were circling around him. No one knew what he said, but the 3 beads immediately stopped revolving. The little boy placed the yellow crystal bead between them and adjusted the distance between the 4 beads evenly. After he chuckled, the red, black, white, and yellow crystal beads began to revolve at a uniform speed. The little boy slowly closed his eyes, and his chest suddenly expanded as he sucked in a mouthful of true essence from his dantian. The speed at which the 4 crystal beads revolved increased, once again turning the true essence in his dantian into a tornado. The resulting strong suction force was like the eye of a tornado, sucking all the true essence in Yu Qianqiu's body back into his dantian. This feeling of true essence flowing in reverse caused cold sweat to appear on Yu Qianqiu's forehead. However, he was in pain and happy at the same time, for he knew what this meant. He was no longer the newbie, he was when he first started cultivating the 5 elemental secret arts. He knew what he needed the most right now: spiritual energy, a large amount of spiritual energy. What the current Yu Qianqiu lacked the least was spirit stones. In a flurry, he took out 2 big handfuls of glowing black divine-grade spirit stones. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as his face contorted into a grimace. Both of his hands gripped the divine-grade spirit stones, madly absorbing the majestic spiritual energy contained within. There was nothing he could do about it. The nascent soul in his dantian was sucking his true essence, and he could only absorb the spiritual energy from the spirit stones to replenish his meridians. Otherwise, he would die from the pain. Chapter 756. No matter how the ruler treated the people, Baiwan was at least a country without foreign aggression. The people's lives were not too difficult. The reason for this was that ancestor Wen Lanfeng was behind it, so no one dared to attack Baiwan for the time being. Of course, ordinary people didn't know who Wen Lanfeng was. Only a few high-ranking officials of Baiwan nation knew who he was. However, because of the death of Baiwan's emperor, the whole country seemed to be in deep mourning, with white mourning everywhere. Although the emperor had passed away, the country still needed a successor. Thus, Crown Prince Wenhao naturally inherited the throne and became the new emperor of Baiwan. Outside the filial bedchamber, white banners covered the sky and the earth, and mournful wails could be heard everywhere. The coffin of the late emperor was in the center of the palace. The new emperor, Wenhao, and his mother knelt on 3 soft cushions below. The last one was empty, and no one knew who it was for. Behind him was a group of the late emperor's concubines, each of them wearing mourning clothes and weeping. Whether or not they really missed the late emperor, their grief was real. With the late emperor gone, they, who often competed with the empress for favor, might not have a good life in the future. The day of the new emperor's reckoning was not far away. The eyes of the former empress, now the Empress Dowager, were red and swollen. She glanced at the empty cushion to the left of the emperor from time to time, unable to hide the anger in her expression. In addition, she had knelt for so long that she was about to fall. Emperor Wenhao reacted quickly and supported her. He asked anxiously, "Mother, are you tired?" The eunuch of the Department of Rites did not dare to be negligent and hurried over to help. "The Empress Dowager is not feeling well. Your servant will help her to rest for a while." The Empress Dowager stubbornly pushed the 2 away and stared at the empty cushion on the left. She said angrily, "Where is Qing? On this mourning day for her father, does she still not change her playful nature?" The emperor immediately gave the eunuch a look. The eunuch understood that the new emperor was protecting his sister and did not want the Empress Dowager to hurt her health. He said with a sorrowful face, "Due to the death of the late emperor, the princess is too sad and hurt her body. It is inconvenient for her to kneel for a long time, so she is staying in the Green Scent Palace to observe mourning. She is not as playful as you think." When the Empress Dowager heard this, the anger on her face gradually disappeared and was replaced by a trace of worry. The emperor immediately said to the eunuch of the Department of Rites, "Go and see how the princess is. Don't let anything happen to her." "Yes." The eunuch hurriedly retreated in fear and trepidation. Inside Wenqing Palace, The guards and palace mates all performed their duties with white filial piety. In the princess's bedroom, white mourning clothes were thrown on the ground, as well as women's undergarments. Panting and moaning could be heard coming from the brocade mattress on the side. A man and a woman were naked together. The man was carrying 2 smooth legs, and was violently pounding them, as if he was madly venting. The sound of slapping echoed in the entire dormitory. After the deed, the man heaved a sigh of relief, and slowly fell to the side. A head of silky black hair slid to the side of the pillow, revealing its true appearance. It was none other than Yan Juexing. The woman whose face was flushed red after her orgasm was the princess of Baiwan Nation. Wen Qing, whose cheeks were still flushed, suddenly burst into tears. She threw herself onto Yan Juexing's body and punched his chest forcefully with her delicate fists. Yan Juexing's eyes were indifferent as he allowed her to hit him with all her might. Her waving fists gradually lost strength. Wen Qing buried her head in Yan Juexing's chest and wailed at the top of her lungs. "You're not human, you're not human. I'm a bad woman. I'm an unfilial daughter. How could I do this to you at a time like this?" During the pleasure in bed, she felt extremely comfortable because of the orgasm, but after waking up from it, she blamed herself deeply and felt extremely conflicted. Outside Wenqing Palace, the eunuch of the Department of Rites had just arrived when he faintly heard Wen Qing's heart-wrenching cries. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. He thought to himself, this is indeed the deep love between father and daughter. No wonder she was the most beloved daughter of the late emperor. This is a cry that comes from the bottom of her heart. Just as he was about to step through the gates of Wenqing Palace, the guard at the gates suddenly waved his arm to stop him. The eunuch of the Department of Rites was startled and immediately shouted, "I'm here on the orders of the new emperor to visit the princess. Back off." He thought he could scare him off, but the other side said expressionlessly, "The princess is too sad and doesn't want to see anyone. Eunuch, please go back." "How dare you? You dare to disobey the emperor's orders." The eunuch of the Department of Rites was furious. He had the emperor's orders, but someone dared to stop him. However, the other party was truly bold. With a clang, a long knife was unsheathed, and a cold light flashed in front of the gates. The guard said in a low voice, "The princess has orders. Anyone who trespasses will be killed without mercy." The eunuch of the Department of Rites was so frightened by the blade that he took a few steps back. He pointed at the guard and said, You, for a long time. He really couldn't understand. Could it be that this guard's head had been kicked by a donkey? Could it be that he couldn't distinguish between the princess and the emperor's orders? In the end, he had no choice but to leave with a flick of his sleeve. Yan Juexing, who was lying on the bed, heard everything clearly. The guards and servants of Wenqing Palace were all controlled by his demonic eyes. He had nothing to worry about. Seeing that the matter was over, his cold eyes stared at the hipster, who was crying on top of him. He waved his arm and pushed her to the side of the bed, wanting to get up. The still crying hipster was slightly startled. As if she had woken up from a dream, her naked body jumped up and knelt on the brocade couch. She hugged Yan Juexing tightly. Yan Juexing turned around indifferently and said, "Didn't you say that I'm not a human? Why are you still hugging me?" The hipster paused. Then with red eyes, she shook her head desperately and said, "I was wrong. I won't scold you anymore. Where are you going?" "Where I go has nothing to do with you. Let go." Yan Juexing said indifferently. "I won't let go." The hipster hugged him even tighter. Back then, when she disguised herself as a man and met Yan Juexing, she was deeply attracted by his speech and elegant demeanor. He was many times better than the nobles around her. However, after they parted in a hurry, she didn't see him again. After that, she searched the entire Lan city, but didn't find any news about Yan Juexing. His accidental appearance opened her heart, but he disappeared without a trace, leaving her with endless melancholy. After that, because she had reached the age of marriage, the emperor had been looking for a husband for her. She used Yan Juexing as the standard and eliminated batch after batch of people that she didn't like. However, at the moment when her father passed away, when she was heartbroken, Yan Juexing magically appeared by her side again. This made her believe that her father knew from the underworld and fulfilled her long-cherished wish. However, this time, Yan Juexing seemed to be a different person. After spending a short time together, he forced her to be his woman. He didn't show any pity in bed. It seemed that he had something unhappy in his heart and was venting it on her. He didn't care if she was dead or alive. It made her heart go through 1,000 twists and turns. But no matter what, his hesitant heart finally had a place to look forward to. Even if she resented him or hated him, she had given her body to him. She was determined to be his woman for the rest of her life. But now, seeing him like this, it seemed that he was going to leave her again. How could she let him go? "I beg you, don't leave me." Wenqing hugged Yan Juexing tightly with her attractive naked body. The original arrogance and unruliness had disappeared. Her face was full of the expression of begging and extravagant hope. The death of her father had already hurt her heart. At this time, her heart was as fragile as a window paper. If Yan Juexing took her body and abandoned her, she couldn't imagine how she could live. Suddenly, Yan Juexing turned her over on the bed without warning. He dragged her white and tender thighs over, lay down suddenly, and forcibly entered her body. Then he crazily sprinted again. The huge force almost made Wenqing's skeleton fall apart. The tearing pain almost made her suffocate, but she still bit her lips and forced a smile to please him. After the raging wind and rain, Yan Juexing lay quietly on one side. Wenqing next to him seemed to be dead, and her body was motionless. After a long time, Yan Juexing stood quietly under the bed, and Wenqing's weak plea came from behind him. "Don't leave me." Yan Juexing slowly turned around, and Wenqing's lifeless eyes showed a pleading look. She stretched out her pale hand powerlessly, as if she was grasping a life-saving straw. She murmured and begged, "Don't leave me." Her outstretched hand suddenly fell down softly. Her eyes slowly closed, and her head tilted to one side powerlessly. The helpless eyes seemed to regard him as the only dependence in this life. The sincere, powerless, and absolute dependence made Yan Juexing, who had been hiding and running for his life, tremble all over. His blood was instantly ignited to boil. At this moment, he suddenly understood that not everyone in this world wanted to kill him or make use of him. There was such a woman who really loved him. She was naked and very frank, and needed him to rely on her, without any selfish thoughts. The faint smell of blood filled the room. Yan Juexing's eyes that had turned from cold to soft suddenly shrank. His gaze fell on her lower body, and the dark red blood was soaking the bed. Yan Juexing's cold expression suddenly became terrified. He, who was used to seeing blood, couldn't help but tremble. He shouted helplessly, "Wenqing!" After that, he seemed to realize that he had to save Wenqing. He took out the elixir from the storage bag on the ground and flashed to the bed. He quickly pointed at Wenqing's acupoints to stop the bleeding. After stopping the bleeding, he immediately helped Wenqing sit up. He put a spirit pill into her mouth and sat cross-legged behind her. He placed his palms on Wenqing's back and desperately injected demonic essence to help her recover. Looking at his anxious and somewhat crazy appearance, it was hard to believe that this person was really Yan Juexing. Wenqing, who was almost pulled away by the god of death, began to breathe again. Yan Juexing snatched her back from the hands of the god of death. At this time, Yan Juexing finally let out a sigh of relief. He gently picked up Wenqing and kicked away the bloodstained blanket. He pulled a clean blanket over Wenqing and placed her on the bed. He carefully stuffed a pillow under her head. Chapter 757. Slowly and meticulously, he put on his clothes and returned to the black-robed Yan Juexing with long hair draped over his shoulders. He slowly sat on the side of the bed and silently watched Hipster's face gradually recover its rosy color. He couldn't help but gently reach out to touch her face. Hipster seemed to sense it. Her eyelids moved slightly, and she seemed to murmur in her sleep, "Don't leave me." Yan Juexing was frightened by this sound and withdrew his hand. He suddenly held his head with both hands and let out a hysterical silent cry. His expression was extremely painful. He didn't know what happened to him just now. Why did he desperately vent his unhappiness on a mortal woman and almost kill her? When Hipster's breathing completely stabilized, Yin Juexing sat on the side in a daze. His expression was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. He stared at Hipster's sleeping face and murmured, "Hipster, I hope there will not be a day when you hate me." Suddenly, footsteps came from outside Wenqing Palace. Yin Juexing suddenly looked up, and his face returned to indifference. Surrounded by a group of people, the new emperor, Wen Hao, came to Wenqing Palace under the guidance of the eunuch of the Department of Rites. There was no other reason. After hearing the eunuch's quiet report, his sister hid in Wenqing Palace and cried her heart out. But the guards didn't let him in to check. Wen Hao, who was deeply in love with his sister, found an excuse to get away from the Empress Dowager and hurried to see her, afraid that his sister would really cry and hurt her health. This time the guards at the door didn't stop them. They held their sabers at their waist and half knelt to let Wen Hao and the others into Wenqing Palace. The maids in the palace all knelt down. Wen Hao walked out of the room and suddenly turned back to shout at the people behind him, "Wait outside." However, the nascent soul cultivator, Wen Bai, who was his personal bodyguard, still followed him to the door. It wasn't that the Wen family couldn't spare experts to protect the emperor, but because of Wen Lanfeng's reputation, no cultivator dared to break into the Baiwan Kingdom's palace to cause trouble. Therefore, the experts with good cultivation hid in the Wen family's sacred land to cultivate. "Royal sister." Wen Hao knocked on the door several times, but there was no reply. Wen Hao hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he turned into the bedroom, he saw a quilt and a woman's underwear on the ground. What made him even more shocked was that a man in a black robe with long hair was sitting in front of the bed, staring at him coldly. Wen Hao was shocked. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Suddenly, he saw the other party's eyes glowing red, and his consciousness instantly blurred. When Wen Bai, who was guarding the door, heard the movement inside, his figure moved and immediately flashed in. The imperial bodyguard who followed him from outside also reacted quickly. Quickly drawing his sword and waving it, he said, "Protect His Majesty." A group of guards pulled out their swords and rushed into the room. Who knew that just as they rushed to the door, they saw Emperor Wen Hao striding out and shouting in a deep voice, "Impudent! Princess Wenqing is not feeling well. Without Zhen's summon, no one is allowed to disturb Princess Wenqing's rest. Retreat to the outside of Wenqing Palace for Zhen." Finished speaking, he turned around and walked back into the inner room. Yes, the group of people retreated out of fear, and not long after, all the people who had just arrived had retreated to the outside of Wenqing Palace. At this moment, Wen Hao and Wen Bai, who were in the bedroom, were bowing to Yin Juexing. "Greetings, master." Yin Juexing looked at Wenqing, who was sleeping soundly, got up from the bed, and waved at the two of them. "Let's go to the main hall and talk. Don't disturb her rest." When the three of them were about to leave the bedroom, Yin Juexing carefully closed the bedroom door. Yin Juexing paced to the main seat in the main hall and sat down. He stared at the two people who were standing respectfully below him and asked, "How many cultivators are there in this palace? What are their cultivations?" Wen Bai immediately replied, "Including me, there are 4 in total, and they are all nascent soul cultivators." "Only 4 nascent soul cultivators?" Yin Juexing was slightly startled, then felt that it made sense. Normal cultivators, even if they were experts at the final stage of tribulation passing, wouldn't dare to trespass into Baiwan Nation's palace, so there was no need to be on guard, as if they were facing a great enemy. So he frowned and said, "Don't tell me that when the emperor passes away and the new emperor succeeds the throne, the people in the Wen family's holy land won't care?" Wen Bai replied, "That's not it. When the late emperor is buried, the ancestor of the Wen family, Wen Rui, will come on behalf of the ancestor to crown the new emperor, which means that the new emperor has been recognized by the Holy Land and is allowed to inherit the Wen family's throne." "Wen Rui," Yin Juexing pondered and said, "Is it the early stage soul formation cultivator Wen Rui, whose cultivation is only below Wen Lanfeng's?" "Yes, it's him," Wen Bai replied. Yin Juexing's eyes flickered. "I've long heard of this person's name. When he comes to crown the new emperor, find a way to bring him here to meet me." If possible, I'd like to go with him to pay my respects to Senior Wen Lanfeng. Sigh. I want to thank Senior Wen Lanfeng and the One Family disciples for taking care of me in Spirit Fong Valley. Yes. Wen Bai bowed and accepted the order. Sitting cross-legged in a cave under the Lus Plain, Yu Qianqiu had already thrown a small pile of depleted spiritual energy stones in front of him. Both of his palms were still holding a big handful of shiny black crystals, crazily absorbing spiritual energy, not daring to stop. If he stopped, the spiritual energy in his dantian would not be able to keep up with the absorption, and his meridians would twitch in pain due to the lack of spiritual energy. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened as he stared at the small pile of depleted spiritual energy stones in front of him. As he threw out the 2 handful of depleted spiritual energy stones, the expression on his face was uglier than crying. If he did not calculate incorrectly, he had already used more than 500 divine grade spirit stones. One divine grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 million high grade spirit stones. So 500 divine grade spirit stones was equivalent to 50 billion high grade spirit stones. Oh my mother! Yu Qianqiu calculated in his heart, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. 50 billion high grade spirit stones. What kind of concept is that? If he had not met a mortal crocodile, the amount of spirit stones he had swindled from Yin Baikong would not have been enough, and he would have had to use the big pile of treasures he had found in the demonic ghost domain. Even if a cultivator had just stepped into the cultivation world and cultivated all the way to the peak spirit severing realm, he would not have needed 50 billion high-grade spirit stones. What the hell is going on with this broken cultivation technique? Why does it burn so much money? Moreover, it's still burning. Does it want people to live? If it wasn't for his good fortune, what would the consequences of cultivating the 5 elemental cultivation techniques be? Wouldn't he be whipped to death? F***ck. This world is really dark. Even cultivating is forbidden to the poor. Isn't this bullying the poor? At this time, his dantian was like a bottomless black hole. Even after filling it with more than 500 divine grade spirit stones spiritual energy, it was still not full. It was still madly absorbing spiritual energy, with no signs of stopping. It was too scary. At this time, even Huang Xiaolong himself was unable to check the situation inside his dantian, and could only crazily transfer spiritual energy into it. When the number of divine grade spirit stones reached 600, Yu Qianqiu's heart was already numb. He mechanically took out spirit stones to absorb spiritual energy, and only cared about transferring the majestic spiritual energy into his body. Sitting there counting while absorbing spiritual energy, this was the only thing he could do at the moment. There was no point in thinking too much about it. He wanted to see how long this bottomless black hole would take. He refused to believe that this bottomless black hole could absorb all of the 100 million divine grade spirit stones Immortal Crocodile had given him. If there was really no other choice, he could only teleport to the Yellow Earth Layer's prison and ask Immortal Crocodile, that rich guy, to continue supporting him. He believed that Immortal Crocodile wouldn't be stingy, otherwise if he died, the old monster would be trapped alive in the Eastern Holy Lands. Thinking of this, Huang Xiaolong's mind was at ease, no longer worrying about not having enough spirit stones. By the time Yu Qianqiu counted close to 900 pieces of divine grade spirit stones, the rate of spiritual energy absorption in his dantian suddenly slowed down. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Coincidentally, when he reached 900 pieces of divine grade spirit stones, his dantian finally stopped breathing. Crash! The dried up spirit stones fell to the ground. Yu Qianqiu was speechless looking at them. It had been a long time since he could remember clearly, and he didn't take it to heart at that time. However, he remembered clearly that he had used around 300 million high-grade spirit stones when he cultivated the gold arts on the Immortal Ascension platform. Now he actually used 90 billion high-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to a 300-fold increase. Based on this calculation, if he had a chance to cultivate the wood arts, would his spiritual energy increase by another 300-fold? 900 times 300 was equal to 270,000 divine grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air, as he suddenly felt that his dantian was abnormally quiet. He quickly used his spiritual sense to check his dantian. Fortunately, the movements inside his dantian were no longer as loud as when he was absorbing spiritual energy. His divine sense was able to detect the movements inside his dantian. At this time, the amount of true essence inside his dantian was as thin as mist. Although the little boy's nascent soul was still the same size, it had turned into a middle-aged man, looking exactly like Yu Qianqiu, sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. The four-colored crystal bead that had stopped spinning started to spin again, pulling Yu Qianqiu's dantian along with it. The spinning speed became faster and faster, dazzling the eyes of those watching. In the end, the things inside his dantian reminded Yu Qianqiu of a picture of Saturn from his past life's textbooks. The nascent soul that looked like him was spinning into a round ball, resembling Saturn itself, and the four crystal beads resembled the rings of Saturn's moons. Moreover, they were multicolored rings, extremely beautiful. All of a sudden, a loud boom resounded in his dantian, akin to the Big Bang. The rings of light around the four crystal beads suddenly expanded, and the perfectly round nascent soul in the middle exploded into a cloud of dust, filling his dantian in an instant. The dust from the explosion rushed out of his dantian, entering every meridian in Yu Qianqiu's body. In that split second, Yu Qianqiu finally experienced what it meant to be sweet after suffering, feeling so comfortable that he let out a moan. He felt that his whole body was full of explosive energy, a kind of powerful energy that he had never experienced before, so powerful that it felt like it was going to rush out of his body. His bones and veins were stretching and contracting with a creaking sound. It was a pleasant feeling of reaching the sky in a single bound. He opened his eyes abruptly, and they flickered with a bright light. He was filled with unprecedented confidence. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and closed his eyes again to check the situation inside his dantian. With just one glance, he was immediately stunned. He saw that the four-colored crystal beads were spinning at a moderate speed, and two nascent souls that looked like him appeared in it. They sat back to back with their eyes closed, inhaling and exhaling the aura inside his dantian to refine it. Yu Qianqiu immediately remembered what Nongzhu had told him about the 3 souls and 7 spirits. The nascent soul was the life soul of the 3 souls and 7 spirits. When another soul was born from the life soul, it would be the heavenly soul, which was the sign that one's cultivation had entered the divinization stage. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.